Chapter 88. What Ning Chen wanted to do, only he knew in his heart. It was a very crazy and bold idea. Fan Lingyue didn't know that he was still alive, so he wanted to give her a big surprise. However, before that, he had to find a way to stab the Qing family in the back. He couldn't take it lying down. In this world, he could be bullied, but he couldn't bully Zhang Sun. Qing Wushuang wasn't a simple woman. She could endure what ordinary people couldn't. He heard that the Qing family had a young master named Qing Wuyo, who hadn't appeared in the residence for a long time. He didn't know what kind of role the Qing family played in Fan Lingyue's hands, but if he could destroy it, it would cause some trouble for Fan Lingyue. Qing Wushuang wanted to recruit him now, so it was the best opportunity. The Qing family was deep, and it wasn't a secret that Qing Wushuang and Qing Wuyo didn't get along. This kind of thing wasn't rare in any big family. Moreover, since the appearance of the military advisor in Northern Meng royal court, the status of women rose sharply. If Qing Wushuang wanted to rise, she naturally had to step on Qing Wuyo. The current master of the Qing family was a very low-key person. Perhaps it was because of her personality, or perhaps it was because of the situation. In the era where Fan Lingyue was in power, it was destined that any big shot in Northern Meng would be overshadowed. This also caused the younger generation of the Qing family to be dazzling, completely overshadowing the previous generation. Other than Qing Wuyo and Qing Wushuang, there was also an extremely mysterious eldest daughter, Qing Wuhan. The direct descendant of the Qing family, one son and two daughters. In the past, the position of the next master would belong to Qing Wuyo, but it wasn't the case now. Not to mention Qing Wuhan, who had never shown herself, Qing Wushuang alone wouldn't sit by and watch the position of the master of the Qing family fall to someone else. A peaceful night passed. On the second day, Ning Chen arrived punctually at the main hall of the Qing family. Qing Wushuang also arrived quickly. Her face was still as cold as before, and one could even see a hint of disgust. Ning Chen expressed his understanding. Last night, when he smiled at the mirror, he also disgusted himself. There was a saying, "I'm ugly, but I'm gentle." Second Mississippi, Ning Chen decided to perform well, greeting her brilliantly, respectfully, and with a good attitude. Qing Wushuang frowned, not used to the former's change. If it wasn't for this face that disgusting, she would also like to have a good relationship with a young expert with potential. "Well, did you rest well last night?" Qing Wushuang nodded in acknowledgement, comforting herself that no matter how ugly the face was, she could get used to it. Unconsciously, her tone became slightly better. "Not bad. I just lack a little girl to accompany me." Ning Chen grinned. Qing Wushuang snorted coldly in her heart, but her tone remained calm as she said, "I will arrange for a maid to accompany you tonight." Hearing this, Ning Chen's heart skipped a beat, and he was a little dumbfounded. He knew that he had gone overboard with his acting. When he came to his senses, he hurriedly laughed and covered it up. How could those vulgar rouge and powder enter the eyes of a fair-skinned gentleman like me? It would be better if second Miss personally accompanied me. Qing Wushuang's expression darkened again. This fellow hadn't even finished his sentence, and he had already reverted back to his disgusting self. "Bai Yutang, I don't want to hear these words a second time. Alright, since you've entered the Qing family, you naturally have to abide by the Qing family's rules. Now, follow me to the law enforcement hall to do the first thing." After saying that, Qing Wushuang turned and walked out of the main hall, towards a side hall in the west. Ning Chen withdrew his smile and followed behind. After the scare just now, he was a lot more well-behaved along the way. The law enforcement hall was not far from the main hall. The person in charge was the middle-aged man from yesterday. After Qing Wushuang entered, she politely greeted him, and then officially led Ning Chen to the front. "Name?" In front of a stone pillar engraved with names, the middle-aged man asked. "Bai Yutang, Bai as in fair-skinned gentleman, Yu as in jade tree, Tang as in dignified appearance." Ning Chen replied seriously. Qing Wushuang endured her disgust and did not go up to kick him. The middle-aged man pointed through the stone pillar and engraved the 3 words by Yutang under the densely packed names. Then he turned to look at the young man in front of him and said calmly, "From today onwards, you are officially a guest of the Qing family. The Qing family doesn't care about your background. As long as you perform well, one day you will be bestowed with the surname Qing and enjoy all the resources of the Qing family. I hope you can cherish it. Pay." Ning Chen did not hesitate to disdain him in his heart. Lying without even blushing. He dared to guarantee that there were many people secretly investigating his identity right now. However, how could it be so simple to miss a person who appeared out of nowhere? By the time they found out, he would have long run away. Even so, Ning Chen was still very serious. He nodded seriously and said, "In order to marry second miss as soon as possible, I will definitely work hard." The middle-aged man and Qing Wushuang felt helpless in their hearts. They did not know where this person's face and confidence came from. 2 days later, the Qing family will choose 3 people from the younger generation to participate in the martial feast in the imperial palace. Do you want to sign up? The middle-aged man thought for a while, and still made the announcement according to the rules. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. He secretly thought that it was finally time. This was the reason why he chose to become a guest of the Qing family. Ever since Fan Lingyue came to power, the Northern Meng Imperial Palace would hold such a martial feast every year. Every major aristocratic family had a quota, and the top 3 of the martial feast would even receive a special reward from the emperor. It was said that the young general by Fan Lingyue's side was the champion of the first martial feast. However, although the martial feast had been going on for 7 years, the rules were constantly changing. In the first 3 years, the participants had to be below 20 years old. In the middle 2 years, the age limit was relaxed to below 30 years old. In the following 2 years, the conditions were relaxed again to below 35 years old. This also caused the martial feast to become more and more unfair to the younger generation. However, Ning Chen was not surprised at all. In Fan Lingyue's eyes, there was no such thing as fairness. There was only the difference between usefulness and uselessness. 7 years ago, Fan Lingyue was still at the stage of stabilizing the court. He needed to cultivate a group of obedient and talented young people. In the middle 2 years, the court gradually stabilized. What he needed more were officials with steady minds and a desire to achieve great things. In the recent 2 years, Northern Meng had already entered a period of complete stability, gradually entering middle age. A group of people with mature minds would instead be more suitable candidates. The younger generation of the Qing family had already matured. Logically speaking, the 3 spots should not be given to outsiders. However, all signs indicated that Qing Wuhan and Qing Wuyou were not in Northern Meng's capital. This also caused at least 2 of the 3 spots of the Qing family to be empty. Therefore, when he heard the elder of the law enforcement hall ask him this question, Ning Chen could not help but smile. His smile was abnormally bright. Whether or not he could poke the Qing family's sore spot depended on this. This young master is registered. After saying this, Ning Chen turned to look at Qing Wushuang. He grinned and said, "Second miss, if I become the champion of the martial feast, will you consider marrying me?" This time, Qing Wushuang did not refuse. Unexpectedly, she agreed. "Sure. Wushuang, don't mess around." The middle-aged man shouted with an unhappy expression. "Elder Fa, Wushuang knows what to do," Qing Wushuang replied seriously. "Ha, straightforward." Ning Chen laughed loudly. He turned his wheelchair and walked out. In that instant, a coldness that could not be colder flashed through his smile. "Wushuang, you're messing around too much," the middle-aged man said with an unhappy expression. Qing Wushuang lightly shook her head. "Elder Fa, I've carefully considered what I said just now. Among the 32 candidates for this year's martial feast, the weakest is at least at the 6th rank. Most of them are at the 7th rank. Although there are few at the 8th rank, it's not like there aren't any. These years, the requirements for the martial feast have been relaxed again and again, making it harder and harder to become the champion. If he really has the strength to become the champion, even if I marry him, it wouldn't be a disgrace to me. The middle-aged man sighed and said helplessly, "You decide for yourself." This second miss of the Qing family was good at everything, but she was too calculative. She could even coldly use her own life's most important matter as a transaction. After going through the law enforcement hall, the two of them paid their respects to the 3 elders of the law enforcement hall, the law enforcement hall, and the law enforcement hall. Only then did the ceremony of entering the Qing family officially come to an end. When Ning Chen returned to his small courtyard, he was already exhausted. The rules of the Qing family were really troublesome. These were only the rules of the guest elders. If he was officially bestowed the surname Qing, who knew how many tests he would have to go through? However, for the remaining 2 days, Ning Chen was much more relaxed. Qing Wushuang came once to deliver 2 swords, one heavy and one light. She told him to choose one. Ning Chen naturally didn't hesitate to take both swords. This caused Qing Wushuang to frown again. How could this guy be so greedy? This young master has always used dual swords. Ning Chen didn't care what Qing Wushuang was thinking. He arrogantly and shamelessly replied. As it turned out, this was well-founded. 2 days later, in the Qing family's selection, Ning Chen stubbornly used dual swords to fight for a spot. The elders of the Qing family weren't too surprised. This brat was a bit ugly, but his strength was unquestionable. No matter which family he was from in the capital, it wouldn't be difficult for him to obtain a spot. The slightly troublesome part was this brat's identity. According to him, he came from the Ni country in the south. However, they really didn't know when the Ni country had appeared in the world. The world was too big, and there were as many countries as there were hairs on an ox. Not being able to name them was even more common. They also had no way of determining whether it was real or fake. The spies they sent out had already gone south according to this brat's description. They couldn't really trust a person of unknown origin. If he wanted to become a member of the Qing family, he would have to go through many tests. Ning Chen's heart was clear about this. He was just practicing his drawing. As for whether or not he could find it, it had nothing to do with him. The imperial palace's martial feast was in 7 days. The entire Qing family attached great importance to it. They did their best to satisfy Ning Chen and the other 2 people's requests. Qing Wushuang didn't participate and gave her spot to someone else. Her cultivation method was special, and it wasn't convenient for her to reveal it at the martial feast. The Qing family was generous, so Ning Chen naturally wouldn't be polite. He took the opportunity to ask for a wheelchair. The one he was sitting on only cost a dozen or so taels of silver. It would probably break after a few fights. However, at this time, bad news came, causing the atmosphere of the Qing family to immediately become heavy. A 9th-rank guest elder had come to the capital's Shao family. Chapter 89. In this world, 9th-ranked martial artists were not as common as cabbages. Those under 35 years old were even rarer. Ning Chen used to think that 9th-ranked martial artists were worthless. Everyone he met was a 9th-ranked martial artist, and each one was younger than the last. After thinking about it, he realized that it was not because there were too many geniuses, but because there were too many geniuses in the palace. Xia Kingdom, the #1 country in the world, naturally had no lack of experts and geniuses in its palace. In fact, after he left the palace, this situation immediately disappeared. In this world, there were more normal people than monsters. Northern Meng royal court was much weaker than Xia Kingdom. The number and level of experts were also much lower. The few 9th-ranked martial artists in the Qing clan were all over 50 years old, and this was the result of many years of hard work in recruiting martial artists. It was too difficult to produce a 9th-ranked martial artist in the younger generation. The Qing clan did not have one, nor did the other clans in the capital. Unexpectedly, one came from the most inconspicuous Shao clan. The Qing clan and Shao clan were not on good terms. In other words, among the top 10 clans in the capital, there was no one who was truly friendly. The arrival of a 9th-ranked martial artist in the Shao clan was not good news for the rest of the clans. Ning Chen was helpless. He despised the Qing clan's luck. They all relied on external help. Those who were lucky got a 9th-ranked martial artist, and those who were unlucky got him. The martial arts banquet was approaching. The atmosphere in the capital was getting heavier by the day. 7 days later, the vast and magnificent desert city finally welcomed the most important event of the year. The leader of the Qing clan was Elder Fa from the Law Enforcement Hall. Qing Wushuang also followed beside him. The other two from the Qing clan were the best among the disciples with different surnames. One of them was a 7th-ranked martial artist, and the other was an 8th-ranked martial artist. Ning Chen still had that sloppy look on his face. He sat in his wheelchair and hummed a tune. His nostrils were up in the air, and he was extremely arrogant. Elder Fa was not a talkative person. As long as it was not too out of line, he would not care. Qing Wushuang even walked at the front of the group without looking back. The other two from the Qing clan had seen Ning Chen's strength. They knew that this guy was not as stupid as he looked, so they did not want to provoke him. Therefore, in the whole group, Ning Chen became the overlord. He was definitely the most eye-catching person. The palace of Northern Meng Royal Court was located in the center of the capital. Although it was not as magnificent and majestic as Xia Kingdom, it had its own unique style. The palaces rose and fell, creating a unique scene in the desert. The Qing family was neither the strongest nor the weakest of the 10 great families of the royal city, at least on the surface. The strongest family was, without a doubt, the royal Ming family. Ranked second was the Yang family, a family that had a position in the military that could not be underestimated. Comparatively speaking, the Qing family was somewhat inconspicuous, and the degree of attention they received was really ordinary. However, this year seemed to be an exception, because there was an idiot in the mistress's family. The Qing family had always kept a low profile. Now, the ugly young man in the wheelchair was too eye-catching. His nose was up in the air, and he looked like he was number one in the world. It was hard for him not to be noticed. With regards to this kind of idiot, other than spitting in their hearts, everyone did not take it seriously. In the cultivation of martial arts, one's state of mind was as important as one's talent. If a person with such a bad personality wanted to succeed in martial arts, the sun would rise from the west. Of course, they didn't mean to insinuate the imperial preceptor. The imperial preceptor was a genius of his generation. How could ordinary people compare to him? In front of the palace, the people of the 10 great families were already in position. The Qing family was in the middle of the row on the right, and the leading family was the royal family, the Ming family. On the other side, the Yang family was at the front, and the Shao family was at the back. In front of the palace, the little emperor of Northern Meng sat quietly on the dragon throne. Although his face was young, he already had the faint majesty of an emperor. Ning Chen raised his head and looked at the little emperor. His eyes narrowed slightly. Was this the son of the late emperor of Northern Meng that Fan Lingyue helped up? Just from their first meeting, he was more or less a little weak. Even though he tried his best to maintain the majesty of an emperor, he still felt that something was missing. He believed in Fan Lingyue, just like he believed in himself. This little emperor would be a good emperor. Unfortunately, he was the emperor of Northern Meng. It was impossible for Great Xia and Northern Meng to have peace. As long as Northern Meng wanted to go down south, the first obstacle they would face was Great Xia. The grudge between the two dynasties was a territorial issue. Unless Northern Meng gave up on their ambition to go down south, the war would continue. Northern Meng having Fan Lingyue was the greatest misfortune of Great Xia. Let's begin. At this moment, the little emperor of Northern Meng announced the start of the martial feast. His voice was a little soft and had the crispness of a child's voice. He sounded like a girl. Other than the Yang family and the royal family, the Ming family, each of the 10 aristocratic families sent out 3 young experts. Including the 8 from the Yang and Ming families, there were a total of 32 people. The rules of the competition were very simple. They would draw lots and eliminate people one by one until the top 4 were decided. Then, they would fight in pairs to decide the top 3. Ning Chen was the first in the first round, and his opponent was a girl who was a 6th-grade martial artist. It could be said that he was the best of the best. The remaining 2 from the Qing family were not so lucky. An 8th-grade martial artist would meet a 7th-grade martial artist, and a 7th-grade martial artist would meet an 8th-grade martial artist. Ning Chen's smile became even more brilliant. The scar on his face kept wriggling, making the surrounding people want to hide far away. The wheelchair squeaked on the stone floor. Ning Chen came to the center of the martial feast and stabbed his heavy sword into the ground. Looking at the girl opposite him, he laughed loudly and said, "Come, I will give you a handicap of my legs." Bah! Everyone couldn't help but spit in their hearts. This person's face was already unparalleled. If you have the ability, then don't give me a handicap. The girl opposite him clearly had a good temper and was even a bit nervous. She even stuttered a word of thanks. The scene was too strange. The 10 aristocratic families' people were a bit dizzy. The fight hadn't even started yet, but they already felt that there was nothing to see. The following fight was not as they had guessed. It was extremely boring. The thick-skinned man and the stuttering girl exchanged over 100 moves before the thick-skinned man won. "I'm so tired." Ning Chen put on an act, panting as he walked back. "Don't go easy on me in the next fight," Qing Wushuang indifferently said. "Oh, you even saw through that?" Ning Chen pretended to be surprised. "Don't think that other than you, everyone else is an idiot. Whether or not I went easy on you, everyone will know." Qing Wushuang coldly replied. I'm a person who has tender feelings for the fairer sex." Ning Chen shook his head and sighed. Qing Wushuang didn't say anything else. She felt uncomfortable talking to this guy. As long as he could win, he could fight however he wanted. Ning Chen gave this martial feast a disgusting start. After the last round of competition, everyone's appetite wasn't whetted again. The Qing family's 7th rank was eliminated without a doubt. The 8th rank advanced. Including Ning Chen, there were 2 in total. The results were neither good nor bad. In the second round, Ning Chen wasn't the first. He was placed in the middle. His opponent was a 7th rank. In the end, Ning Chen barely advanced. The Qing family's 8th rank also advanced. It was an easy fight. After all, most people were still 7th ranks. In the third round, Ning Chen's opponent was still a 7th rank. After fighting for a long time, he once again won by half a move. Immediately, the whole place was filled with boos and jeers. The Qing family's 8th rank met an 8th rank expert from the Imperial Ming family and was eliminated. The top 4 came out. The Ming family, the Yang family, and the Shao family each had 1 person. 2 8th ranks, 1 9th rank, and finally the lucky thick-skinned man, Ning Chen. When the rankings came out, Ning Chen used up his bullshit and directly faced the Shao family's 9th rank. The Ming and Yang family's 8th rank experts were also tit for tat. No one showed weakness. Then, Ning Chen admitted defeat. The banquet was filled with boos, curses, and mockery. The young people were full of anger. They had been unhappy with this person for a long time. If they didn't vent their anger, they would suffocate to death. The Shao family's 9th rank didn't win. He smoothly won a round. However, the top 4 rule was that everyone had to fight 3 rounds. The result was still unknown. The Ming and Yang family's 8th rank experts fought fiercely. Both of them were at the peak of rank 8 and could step into rank 9 at any time. It could be said that they were evenly matched. They didn't dare to hold back in every move. In the end, both of them were injured. The stronger Ming family's 8th rank expert won this difficult battle by a single move. The Yang family's 8th rank expert was crippled. In the last move, his Qi Ocean was injured. It was hard to say if the Ming family's 8th rank expert did it on purpose. However, the Yang family was the last to be eliminated without a doubt. Ning Chen was foolishly guaranteed to be in the top 3. For a moment, he couldn't react. The Yang family's 8th rank expert was crippled. Ning Chen's battle was empty. The other battle was between the Ming family's 8th rank and the Xiao family's 9th rank. The battle between the 9th and 8th ranks didn't have much suspense. The Xiao family's 9th rank quickly won, and the Ming family's 8th rank lost. Then, Ning Chen admitted defeat again. This time, the surrounding people couldn't take it anymore. All kinds of curses rose and fell. Was this a competition? This was to disgust everyone. The few people from the Qing family also felt that they had lost face. The top 3 was too shameful. However, what kind of person was Ning Chen? He was so thick-skinned that he could withstand swords and sabers. No matter how strong you were, he wouldn't fight no matter how strong you were. The martial banquet's champion, 2nd place, and 3rd place, come up to receive your title. At this moment, the eunuch beside the northern Meng young emperor spoke in a hoarse voice. Immediately, the scene quieted down. Ning Chen grinned. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The wheelchair creaked. Ning Chen was on the left, the Xiao family's 9th rank was in the middle, and the Ming family's 8th rank was on the right. They climbed up the stairs and arrived in front of the emperor. I am Bai Yutang. I wonder if I can ask your majesty to bear witness to something. Ning Chen looked at the young emperor and grinned. Speak, the young emperor said maturely. The Qing family's 2nd young miss once promised that as long as I took the position of champion, she would agree to marry me. She even asked your majesty to bear witness. Ning Chen's smile became more and more brilliant. The scars on his face also became more and more twisted. Ning Chen didn't lower his voice, so everyone present heard these words. At the same time they were puzzled, they saw a black light flash by. The Xiao family's 9th rank, the Ming family's 8th rank. A sword without warning. Condensed with frost and dyed with blood, it drew the most beautiful light. It was so fast that no one saw it clearly, including the 2 people who had already fallen. Under the feet of the emperor, who dared to rashly perform martial arts. Now that the 2 of them are dead, will the champion be me? Ning Chen was laughing. There was madness in his laughter. The black sword in his hand dripped with blood, shocking everyone present. Chapter 90. Qing Ning had said before that there were no absolutes below the Khanate stage. Even a 10-year-old child could kill a 9th-rank powerhouse who was severely injured. Ning Chen was not a 10-year-old child. The Xiao family's 9th rank and the Ming family's 8th rank were not severely injured. However, they still could not dodge this attack. Because the thought of dodging did not even cross their minds. For some reason, they deserved to die. With the 2 dead, the little emperor was exposed in front of Ning Chen. How far was a distance of 3 feet? A little more than 10 meters was very close to a martial artist. However, how could the emperor not have a powerhouse by his side? When Ning Chen's sword moved, a figure appeared beside the emperor. A 9th rank, another 9th rank, and a true powerhouse who far surpassed the Xiao family's 9th rank. A powerful palm came at him, and the wheelchair shattered with a bang. However, the original figure in the wheelchair was gone. Ning Chen, who was crippled, could not dodge this attack. However, it did not mean that he could not dodge it with his legs intact. He had been in the wheelchair for many, many days just for this day. A 9th-rank powerhouse was also human. Naturally, he would have a blind spot. With a blind spot, he would make a mistake in judgment. Ning Chen took advantage of this mistake and avoided the palm. He approached the little emperor and grabbed the latter's shoulder. "Your Majesty, please grant the marriage." Ning Chen stood beside the little emperor and said seriously. "How dare you?" The little emperor frowned and shouted angrily. "Your Majesty, please grant the marriage." Ning Chen was unmoved and replied calmly. Below the stone steps, the 10 families finally came to their senses. They were all shocked. No one expected such a drastic change in such a short time. Using force in front of the palace to force the emperor to grant the marriage was a capital offense. 9 generations of the family would be executed. The people from the Qing family were shocked, especially Qing Wushuang. Her expression was extremely ugly. This person wanted to consign the Qing family to eternal damnation. As expected, an old official in front of the palace looked angry. He looked at the people from the Qing family and said sternly, "Let him go." Qing Wushuang walked forward and said gloomily, "Bai Yutang, I agree to marry you. Let go of the emperor." The rank 9 in front of the palace also tensed up. Once Ning Chen let go of the little emperor, he would immediately kill him. "If I believed you, then I would have lived 17 years in vain. Little emperor, come with me." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen grabbed the little emperor and walked step by step towards the palace. When he passed by the middle of the martial feast, he stopped for a moment and said calmly, "Qing Wushuang, go and prepare a horse. My patience is limited. I hope you can hurry up." Hearing this, Qing Wushuang frowned, unable to conceal the fury in her heart. Just as she was about to flare up, she was stopped by a voice. "Do as he says," the old official in front of the palace said angrily. Qing Wushuang snorted coldly and left quickly. Ning Chen grabbed the little emperor and walked out of the palace step by step. A large group of people followed behind him. They did not dare to get too close, nor did they dare to stay too far away. The little emperor was very stubborn. He didn't beg for mercy at all. Ning Chen admired him in his heart. This little guy was very good. It seemed like that woman Fan Lingyue had groomed an incredible successor for the Northern Meng royal court. Talent, knowledge, the way of ruling a country, anything could be learned. However, the bearing of the ruler of a country could not be lost. Otherwise, if even the emperor begged for mercy, what would happen to the subjects of the entire Northern Meng? After a large number of guards in the palace surrounded them, they had no choice but to make way. They watched Ning Chen walk out of the palace with the little emperor. Behind them, the imperial 9th grade followed step by step, waiting for an opportunity to save the emperor. However, Ning Chen had endured for so long. How could he make any mistakes at this time? Holding the little emperor in his left hand and the ink sword in his right hand, he never relaxed for a moment. At this distance, no one could save the little emperor except for Xiantian experts. He was a 7th grade. Perhaps he could not defeat the 9th grade, but it did not mean that he had no power to fight back. Before the 9th grade made a move, he had enough confidence to drag the little emperor down with him. Everyone present understood this point. Therefore, no one dared to make a move easily. No one dared to bear this great crime that would implicate 9 generations of their family. In front of the palace, Qing Wushuang led a horse over. Looking at Ning Chen, she asked with hatred, "Who exactly are you?" "Country of Ni, White Jade Hall," Ning Chen replied with a smile. Qing Wushuang was so angry that her chest felt stuffy. Even at this time, this guy still refused to give himself away. Next, a strange scene appeared in front of the people of Northern Meng's capital. An ugly man with a ferocious face led their little emperor and walked in front. Behind him, a woman led a horse and followed closely behind. Behind them, the civil and military officials, as well as the people of the 10 great clans, followed closely behind. Everyone's expression was extremely ugly, as if they had eaten a fly. Northern Meng's capital was not small. Ning Chen led a large group of people and walked for a total of 8 hours. They walked from morning to sunset before they finally left the city. The little emperor's face had already turned pale. A journey of 8 hours was unbearable for a 7-year-old child, but the little emperor still gritted his teeth and persevered. Ning Chen admired this little guy more and more. Threads of true qi flowed through his arm and into the little emperor's body, silently helping him to relieve his fatigue. Night fell and a cold wind began to blow. The night in the desert was very beautiful. The entire sky was clean, and one could see the stars and the bright moon in the sky. The majestic group finally arrived outside the capital. "Ride your horse and wait for me at the Sand Pavilion 30 li east." Ning Chen turned to look at Qing Wushuang and said seriously. Qing Wushuang's expression immediately changed. Every word of this sentence struck at her heart. He wanted her and the Qing family to die without a burial ground. "Do as he says." The old official in the court spoke again with a gloomy expression. Qing Wushuang had no choice but to mount her horse. With a light shout, she rode east. Seeing Qing Wushuang disappear without a trace, Ning Chen grinned at the people behind him. Then, he did something that no one had expected. Ning Chen ran, carrying the little emperor as he ran for his life. While everyone was stunned, only a shadow was left in front of them. If a 7th-rank martial artist ran for his life without a care for anything, he would be faster than a warhorse. The 9th-rank consecrator in front of the palace was the first to react. He stamped his foot and immediately followed. Then, the elders and young experts of the 10 great clans also came to their senses and chased with all their strength. Ning Chen felt helpless. He had no choice but to run. Staying here was just courting death. As for a plan, there was no plan. This was Northern Meng's territory, and the senior was not here. Who knew what to do? He was so nervous that he broke out in a cold sweat when he was able to kidnap the little emperor. The little emperor kept struggling, and Ning Chen slapped the little guy's butt. He liked people who were not violent and did not cooperate. The little emperor bit his lips and tears welled up in his eyes, but he would rather die than cry. His stubborn appearance coupled with his delicate little face made him look like a child who was at odds with his parents. Ning Chen led a large group of people and ran for his life. He did not care about the direction. As he ran, he did not even know where he had run to. Suddenly, 2 shocking sword chi soared into the sky and collided with a loud bang. The surrounding heaven and earth could not bear the huge force and shook violently. In an instant, the world shook and a sandstorm surged. Fuck! Seeing a huge wave of sand come crashing down, Ning Chen only had time to curse before he was buried by the sand. The consecrators in front of the palace and the young and old of the 10 great clans were not any better. They were smashed into the yellow sand by this terrifying wave. In the next moment, a dark yellow light flashed and Ning Chen carried the little emperor out of the sand. He did not say anything and ran away. Fortunately, he had the dust scroll and the power of thick earth in his body, which played a big role at the crucial moment. After 10 breaths of time, the consecrators in front of the palace came out. They raised their heads to look for Ning Chen and the little emperor, but they could no longer see their shadows. The elders and young experts of the 10 great clans also came out of the sand one after another. They were all confused and did not know what was going on. After a while, they came to their senses and their hearts sank. The emperor was lost. He was kidnapped by a 7th-rank young man. This was a great humiliation for the Northern Meng imperial court. Everyone's expression became very ugly. They knew that this time, the capital would most likely face a huge purge. Send someone to inform the military advisor of today's matter. In addition, lock up the entire Qing family in the sand dungeon. Kill anyone who resists. The consecrators in front of the palace said coldly. Yes. An elder and 3 young experts of the Ming family respectfully accepted the order. They immediately went forward and restrained Elder Fa and the 2 young men of the Qing family. The rest of the 8 great clans did not dare to make a sound. At this time, whoever asked for mercy would be courting death. Moreover, they could not plead for mercy. The three of them did not dare to resist and allowed the experts of the Ming family to seal their qi. The only result of resistance was death. Now, their last hope was that His Majesty could be found as soon as possible. On the other side, Ning Chen ran for another 2 hours. Seeing that no one was following him, he finally let out a sigh of relief. He threw the little emperor down and lay down, panting heavily. The sand was very soft. Even so, the little emperor's mouth was puckered from the pain. After resting for a while, Ning Chen sat up and looked at the little emperor beside him. He curiously asked, "What is your name?" The little emperor turned his head. His expression was angry and he refused to answer. When Ning Chen saw this, he was immediately unhappy. Did he have any awareness of being a hostage? Was he really not going to cooperate without violence? Little guy, it's just the two of us now. If I'm not happy and leave you here, I guarantee that when your officials find you, you'll be left with only bones. After saying this, Ning Chen patted his butt and stood up. He really had the intention to leave. My name is Mingyu. The little emperor could not bear it and replied awkwardly. His voice was soft and crisp. It was very pleasant to hear. No matter how strong a child was, he was still afraid of being left alone in this endless desert. Ning Chen frowned. He felt that something was wrong. A child would not lie. It was just that the name Mingyu sounded very awkward. Today in front of the palace, when he heard the little emperor's voice, he felt that something was wrong. At that time, he thought that it was because the child had not changed his voice. Thinking of this, Ning Chen went forward and grabbed the little emperor's arm. He injected his qi and his expression immediately changed. He could not help but curse again. Fuck. Chapter 91. A girl. Ning Chen wasn't a doctor, so he wasn't good at checking the yin and yang qi in the meridians. However, he wasn't blind. This was clearly a girl's meridians. The little emperor panicked. She hurriedly withdrew her arm and took a few steps back. Her face was pale. You're a girl? Ning Chen asked seriously. No. The little emperor shook her head in a panic, but that crisp and soft voice made the already weak denial seem even more feeble. Ning Chen sighed and didn't ask any more questions. The little emperor's panicked expression confirmed his judgment once again. Northern Meng's little emperor was actually a girl. What a pitiful and ridiculous thing. It turned out that the previous emperor of Northern Meng didn't leave behind any princes. No wonder Fan Lingyue killed all the eunuchs and maids in the palace as soon as he came to power. Fan Lingyue's guts were really big. He actually helped a little princess to the throne. Ning Chen's mind was in a mess. Logically speaking, he should use this secret to threaten Fan Lingyue and even spread the news, causing chaos in Northern Meng's court. However, this was a child after all. Once the truth was exposed, the anger of the entire Northern Meng would be focused on this 7-year-old girl. It was obvious how terrible the consequences would be. A girl in power was still not accepted in this world, let alone a female emperor. There could only be one Fan Lingyue. This was also the limit of what Northern Meng's subjects could accept. Little Mingyu seemed to have thought of something. Her face was pale as she squatted on the ground and shivered. She no longer looked stubborn and looked extremely pitiful. Ning Chen couldn't bear it. Even if his heart was as hard as steel, he couldn't do such a cruel thing. He was a human. No matter how cold-blooded and heartless he was, he still had a heart. If the little emperor had grown up, he would definitely spread the news without hesitation and cause Northern Meng to fall into chaos. However, the one in front of him was just a little girl who had just turned 7. Get up, I won't tell anyone. Ning Chen walked forward and sighed softly. Hearing this, Mingyu raised her head. Her face was filled with shock, disbelief, and a trace of hope. A gentleman keeps his word. I said I won't tell anyone, so I definitely won't. Ning Chen looked at Ming Yu and said seriously. Really? Ming Yu's beautiful eyes were filled with hope as she asked weakly. Really? Ning Chen nodded. Of course, even if he didn't say anything, he wouldn't completely give up on this weakness of his. He still had to get something from Fan Lingyue. However, these were all the schemes between adults, and had nothing to do with the little emperor. Hearing Ning Chen's promise, Ming Yu stood up obediently. Her impression of the former improved a lot. She realized that the ugly man in front of her wasn't completely a bad person. If you send us back, we won't kill you. Ming Yu hesitated for a moment before making what she thought was a huge concession. Ning Chen slapped little Ming Yu's head and said, "Don't talk about me like that in front of me. I don't like it. Also, do you think I won't kill you just because you said so? Those officials of yours can't wait to eat me up." Ming Yu cried out in pain. This emperor. Just as she opened her mouth, she saw that Ning Chen's palm was about to land on her. She immediately changed her words, "I am the emperor of the Northern Meng royal court. I don't want you to die. If anyone dares to oppose this emperor will kill him." Domineering. Ning Chen gave him a thumbs up in his heart. This little emperor had a great style. We'll talk about this later. Let's get out of this desert first. Ning Chen didn't want to continue this topic. Instead, he used the moonlight to look around. He suddenly felt dizzy. It was the same everywhere. How were they supposed to get out? Ming Yu didn't dare to refute and looked around as well. Her dark eyes were filled with confusion. She also didn't know how to get out. "Do you know which way to go?" Ning Chen asked. "I don't know." Ming Yu answered honestly. Ning Chen was very unhappy and said with disdain, "Emperor, you don't even know how to get to your own country." Ming Yu was speechless. The Northern Meng royal court was so big. How could she know everything clearly? "Forget it. Let's go this way." Ning Chen randomly chose a direction and then pulled Ming Yu forward. However, after taking 2 steps, Ning Chen felt that something was wrong. He looked at the little girl and asked, "You can't walk anymore?" "I can walk." Ming Yu bit her lips and said. Ning Chen frowned. He squatted down and untied Ming Yu's shoes. With one look, his expression couldn't help but darken. The little girl's white and tender feet already had several blisters. Some of the skin had already broken, revealing bright red flesh. It looked a bit miserable. Ning Chen felt helpless. This little girl was too stubborn. She was already in this state, but she still refused to make a sound. Speaking of which, it was also his fault. They had walked for more than 8 hours today. Not to mention a little girl, even an adult wouldn't be able to take it. "I'll carry you." Ning Chen carefully put the shoes back on Ming Yu's feet and said. I can walk by myself." Ming Yu's face was slightly red, but she still stubbornly said. "You can either carry me or hug me. Choose." Ning Chen was angry and said angrily. Ming Yu's expression changed again and again. In the end, she had no choice but to compromise. "Carry me." Ning Chen's expression became a bit better. This little girl was asking for a beating. She only agreed to cooperate after he was angry. "Come up." Ning Chen paused and glanced back at him. Ming Yu slowly crawled up, her face turning even redder. In this world, the distance between men and women was far beyond imagination. Moreover, Ming Yu was a member of the imperial family, so she knew even more. For example, a girl's feet couldn't be casually seen by a man. For example, it was taboo for a girl to be carried or hugged by a man. Previously, when they were running for their lives, they didn't have a choice and didn't think too much about it. However, the situation was different now. In the end, it didn't conform to etiquette. How could Ning Chen know so many things? Previously, when he was in the palace, he was basically a big boss. Other than Zhang Sun and Qing Ning, he didn't care about anyone else. Just as Zhang Sun was about to teach him some rules, he had already run away. Moreover, she was just a little girl. How could she be so calculative? The night in the desert was a bit cold. Ning Chen took off his clothes and put them on Mingyu. After all, she was still a little girl and her body was more delicate. Ning Chen felt that this hostage kidnapping was not worth it. Not only did he risk his life, he also had to treat her like an ancestor. Mingyu laid on Ning Chen's back. Feeling warm, she gradually became sleepy. However, at this time, Mingyu suddenly noticed that the scar on Ning Chen's face had opened a little. She couldn't help but feel a bit strange. She reached out her small hand and gently pulled. Then, the scar fell off with a patter. Ning Chen slapped the small hand in front of his face and threatened, "Don't mess around. Be careful or I'll throw you down." Mingyu wasn't really afraid. She could also tell that Ning Chen wasn't as bad as he looked. Moreover, once a woman's curiosity rose, nothing could stop her. Although Mingyu was just a little girl, she was still a woman. Mingyu's sleepiness was gone. She reached out her small hand and carefully tore off the scars on Ning Chen's face one by one. Ning Chen saw that scaring her didn't work, so he didn't bother with her and let her do whatever she wanted. After tearing off the scars, Mingyu looked at them again. She still felt a little uncomfortable. After thinking for a moment, she shifted her gaze to the beard in front of her. "Behave." Ning Chen felt the little girl's gaze and helplessly reprimanded her. However, once you lose your dignity, it's hard to get it back. Mingyu was already sure that he wouldn't do anything to her. The fear in her heart faded. Mingyu's two small hands searched for a long time before she finally found the glued part of the beard. She carefully tore it off. Instantly, her beautiful big eyes curved into crescents with a smile. She was very cute. "You look better now," Mingyu looked at Ning Chen's side profile and said in a soft and crisp voice. "You have good taste," Ning Chen praised. The little girl really knew how to talk. "I'm a little thirsty," Mingyu said. Ning Chen reached out his hand and a silver light lit up. Immediately, snowflakes fell. They were very small. This was the only snow in the desert. Mingyu put her two small hands on Ning Chen's big hands. She held the falling snowflakes and slowly accumulated a small amount of water. "Are you thirsty?" Mingyu asked. "No," Ning Chen replied. Mingyu took a small sip and then put her small hand next to Ning Chen's mouth. She didn't say anything. Ning Chen drank the rest of the water. It was cool and very comfortable. Mingyu wiped her two small hands on Ning Chen's body. After drying them, she put her hands around his neck again. "Can you walk out tomorrow?" Mingyu asked softly. "Yes," Ning Chen replied with certainty. Even if he couldn't, he had to. There was no food or water in the desert. He was still fine, but little Mingyu didn't have any martial arts foundation. She definitely couldn't handle it. Although he had rescued little Mingyu from the Beimeng Imperial Palace, he didn't want her to be hurt. He could be cold-blooded and heartless to everyone in the world, but he couldn't be cruel to a little girl. Moreover, before he saw Fan Lingyue, he couldn't let anything happen to little Mingyu. A normal military advisor was already scary enough, let alone a crazy military advisor. "After we get out, I'll order people to capture you. However, I won't kill you." Mingyu's eyes gradually darkened as she murmured softly. "Up to you," Ning Chen continued walking step by step and replied calmly. Little Mingyu finally stopped talking and fell asleep from exhaustion. Today, this little girl had been frightened too much. No matter how strong she was, she couldn't take it anymore. Ning Chen gently supported her with his hands so that little Mingyu could sleep more comfortably. When he turned his head, he saw that the little girl was still wearing the crown that symbolized imperial power. He couldn't help but frown. He carefully took it off and casually threw it into the desert. In the next moment, little Mingyu's long hair fell down like a waterfall and hung down behind her back. The night wind blew, and it fluttered gently. Occasionally, a few strands of hair would mischievously fall on Ning Chen's face. It was numb and itchy. Under the moonlight, above the desert, Ning Chen quietly walked step by step. He didn't say another word. On his back, the little girl was sleeping soundly. In her dream, there was no fear or struggle. Chapter 92. After Mingyue fell asleep, Ning Chen walked faster and faster. Under the night sky, he was like a white shadow, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The desert was unimaginably huge. The two of them had lost their way while running for their lives and could only head in one direction now. Fortunately, although the moon might not rise from the east, it would never change its pattern of heading west. If they kept walking in the direction of the moon, they would eventually walk out of the desert. Little Mingyue was in a deep sleep, her delicate little face still showed signs of fatigue. The little girl was indeed frightened previously. Fortunately, he was not a bad person. At least, that was what Ning Chen thought. However, he had kidnapped the little emperor of Northern Meng. The Northern Meng royal court would definitely be in chaos for a while. Fan Lingyue was only one person after all and couldn't take care of the throne. This was the best chance for Great Xia to take a breather. This woman was too powerful. If they continued to fight, no one knew what the outcome would be. The night passed quickly. When the sky was about to brighten, Ning Chen gradually saw the specks of oases in front of him. Northern Meng's territory was either desert or grassland. It was very barren and only sheep and horses could sustain their livelihood. This was also the reason why the people of Northern Meng were so valiant. The end of the desert meant that they could find food and water. Ning Chen walked faster, hoping to meet the herdsman of the grassland earlier. Little Mingyue was still sleeping soundly. She looked very cute and was no longer the awkward little girl from before. Unfortunately, Ning Chen couldn't find any herdsman even after searching for a long time. It seemed like there was no one living in this oasis. Actually, this wasn't strange. The Northern Meng royal court was vast but sparsely populated. It wasn't easy to meet someone in the vast grassland. There was a small river in the oasis. It wasn't big but he could see the silhouettes of fish. Little Mingyue needed to eat. After running with him for a day and a night, she was probably starving. Ning Chen gently put down little Mingyue and went to the river alone. With a stroke of his right hand, a silver light flashed and the entire river was frozen. A few small fish fell onto the ice. Ning Chen bent down and picked them up one by one. He then returned to the shore and prepared to start a fire to roast the fish. Little Mingyue woke up in a daze. She didn't know where she was. When she saw the vast grassland, she remembered that she was kidnapped. "What are you doing?" Mingyue sat up and rubbed her eyes. It was still a little cold in the morning. Little Mingyu wrapped herself in her oversized clothes and didn't want to move at all. Usually, at this time, court would have already ended. She had never slept so long before. "Cooking," Ning Chen replied casually as he was cleaning up the fish. "How do we start a fire?" Mingyu nodded and immediately raised a very practical question. "Eat it raw," Ning Chen threatened. "Shen, I'm not eating anymore." Mingyu was indeed intimidated. She wrinkled her nose and looked a little worried. "Goo goo." The little girl's stomach growled. Her worried little face became even more worried. Ning Chen tidied up the fish and picked up some firewood from the ground. Then, he walked in front of little Mingyue and sat down. He calmly took out a fire starter. As someone who often bombed other people's residences, how could he not have something to ignite the fire on him? Besides, even if he didn't bring this thing, he was already a 7th-ranked expert. Drilling wood to get a fire was still doable. Mingyu pouted. She was unhappy that the bad guy had lied to her. After starting the fire, Ning Chen skewered the fish with a branch and slowly roasted it. At this moment, Mingyu's face turned slightly red. She shyly stood up and secretly ran away. After a while, she ran back. Of course, Ningchen wasn't stupid enough to ask about everything. Little girls also knew how to be shy. After returning, little Mingyu had already washed herself clean. Her face was also much cleaner. It was just that her oversized clothes looked a little out of place. The northern Meng royal family's bloodline was different from the people of the Central Plains. They looked a little exotic. The little girl inherited all her mother's good points. She already showed the potential of a beauty at a young age. Ningchen was curious. It was fine now, but when little Mingyu grew up, how was she going to deceive those old officials? Fan Lingyue's health wasn't good. He probably couldn't wait until Mingyu grew up. When that time came, who would be able to hold up the sky for a little girl? Thinking of this, Ningchen was a little irritated. When did he become so sentimental? Wasn't he looking forward to Fan Lingyue's early death and northern Meng falling into chaos? The fish is done. Be careful, it's hot. Ningchen passed the roasted fish to little Mingyu, suppressing the messy thoughts in his heart. He would talk about the future in the future. Who could be sure that the little girl wouldn't become the second Fan Lingyue? Mingyu had been watching since just now. When she saw the fish in front of her, her eyes immediately curved and she smiled like a crescent moon. The way the little girl ate was very refined. She took small bites and looked very pleasing to the eye. In comparison, Ningchen was quite unparticular. He finished the fish in 3 bites and didn't even spit out the bones. Out of the 10 fish, little Mingyu ate 2. The remaining 8 were stuffed into Ningchen's stomach. To him, these things were just filling the gaps between his teeth. If he was really full, there would probably be no more fish in this river in the future. After eating her fill, Mingyu's mood was obviously much better. She took the initiative to get up and hurry on with her journey. She didn't feel nervous at all as a hostage. Ningchen was helpless. He had really kidnapped a little ancestor. The two of them set off together and headed south along the grassland. The grassland was very beautiful. Mingyu had never left the palace before and had never heard of such a large grassland. Therefore, she was very curious about everything along the way. Looking at the greenery that gradually covered the ground, she would run a few steps and pick up a small flower. Her smile was very bright. Ningchen didn't care about her. It was fine as long as she was within his sight and didn't run away. What's your name? Mingyu ran to the front, turned around and asked curiously. She still didn't know his real name. As for the name by Yutang, even an idiot would know that it was fake. Ningchen. Ningchen answered honestly. Mingyu thought hard and then said, Sister Lingyue mentioned you in the letter. She said that you're not a good person and we have to be careful. Ningchen was speechless. Fan Lingyue really thought highly of him, instilling the idea of being on guard against him in little Mingyu so early. Actually, he and Fan Lingyue weren't good people. He was ruthless, but Fan Lingyue was even more ruthless. The difference between the two of them was just 50 steps and 100 steps. When we meet the herdsman, change your clothes. It's too conspicuous. Ningchen didn't argue with the little girl and instead suggested. She came out in a hurry, so little Mingyu was still wearing the little yellow robe she wore during the imperial court. It was indeed very conspicuous. Mingyu wrinkled her little nose. After a moment, she seemed to have thought of something. Touching her head, she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Zhen, where's my crown? I threw it away. Ningchen didn't care. What was the use of that thing? It was so heavy and would affect a child's development. How can you throw away my things? Mingyu was furious. She pointed at the bad guy in front of her and said crisply. You're my hostage now, why can't I throw it away? Ningchen reminded the little girl of her current identity. You're a bad guy. Mingyu was so angry that her little chest puffed up. Ha, I never said that I was a good person. Ning Qin said leisurely. Which good person would do something like taking a hostage? Moreover, he was taking the emperor of a dynasty. Mingyu turned her face away and decided to ignore him. She walked in front angrily. Ning Qin didn't mind and slowly followed behind her. Wherever the little girl went, he would follow. He wasn't in a hurry to travel yet. The one who should be in a hurry wasn't him, but the northern Meng imperial court and Fan Lingyue. In the end, little Mingyu was too bored by herself and took the initiative to compromise. She once again made a big concession. I forgive you. Mingyu stopped and waited for Ning Chen to catch up. Ning Chen smiled. This little girl was quite magnanimous. He thought that she was going to argue with him for a while. Okay, let's make up. Ning Chen stretched out his hand and smiled. Okay. Mingyu put her little hand in his big hand and let the bad guy hold it. Are we going to Grand Xia? Mingyu suddenly asked. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. He still had to return to Grand Xia in the end. Are you going to hand me over to the Emperor of Grand Xia? Mingyu looked a little sad. She wasn't stupid and naturally knew her value. No. Ning Chen denied without hesitation. He had risked his life to rescue little Mingyu. Why should he hand her over to the Emperor of Grand Xia? Moreover, the Emperor of Grand Xia seemed to have changed into a different person. Mingyu wouldn't be able to survive in his hands. Mingyu raised her little face and asked in surprise, then why did you kidnap me? Ning Chen didn't know how to answer. He really hadn't seriously considered this question. The main reason he kidnapped little Mingyu was to make Fan Lingyue have misgivings. As for how to deal with little Mingyu, he really didn't have any ideas. We'll see. If Fan Lingyue can withdraw her troops, I'll return you to her. Ning Chen thought for a while before answering. What if Sister Lingyue refuses? Mingyu was a little worried. We'll talk about it when the time comes. In any case, I won't hand you over to the Emperor of Grand Xia. You don't have to be afraid. Ning Chen promised. Mingyu smiled happily. She realized that the bad guy wasn't that bad. If you send me back, I'll make you a high official. Mingyu promised very seriously. How high? Ning Chen asked. Mingyu thought for a while before replying, I'll make you a great general. Ning Chen thought for a while. Indeed, it wasn't low. The position of a great general in Grand Xia should be second only to the 10 marquises and on the same level as the city lords. What if Fan Lingyue wants to kill me? Ning Chen asked again. I'll protect you. Sister Lingyue dotes on me a lot. I'll put in a good word for you. Mingyu patted her little chest and said. Ning Chen also smiled. This little girl still had a conscience. She didn't provide for him in vain. In the future, if he really couldn't survive in Grand Xia, little Mingyu would still take him in. Okay, after the war between Grand Xia and Northern Meng is over, I'll send you back. Ning Chen replied softly. Mingyu nodded vigorously. Her little hand grasped his big hand tightly, unwilling to let go. She knew that this would be the only person she could rely on after entering Grand Xia. On the grassland, the big hand held the small hand and Yi walked alone at a steady pace. It looked so peaceful and beautiful. Chapter 93. The little emperor of Northern Meng had been kidnapped. 2 days later, this news spread throughout the world like an earthquake. The entire world was in an uproar. This was even more shocking than Xia's gate pass being breached. After hearing this news, everyone had different reactions. Some rejoiced, and some were disappointed. The war between Northern Meng and Xia had reached its most critical point. Such a thing happening now would undoubtedly have a huge impact on the war. Xia was already in imminent danger. Anyone with a discerning eye could see Xia's current predicament. Up until now, Xia's strongest force, the 10 marquises, had betrayed them. Marquis Bloodclad and Marquis Taiping were heavily injured. Marquis Jiyu, Marquis Xiang, and Marquis Bai were blocked outside Heaven's Gate. On the other side, the Eternal Night cult came aggressively. Their martial lords and 3 peak 9th rank generals were too powerful. Only Marquis Triumphant Return could resist them. In the southwest, there was the Du Yi Temple. Marquis Wangchuan could not return either. As for the southeast, Meniang country was ambitious and could invade again at any time. The 2 dynasties had been fighting on and off for decades and had never been at peace. De Xia had always been wary of this country that was even more shameless than Jinji country. No matter what, Marquis Zhongyong would never return. Due to various reasons, De Xia, which originally had many soldiers and generals, fell into a situation where there were no generals available. De Xia, which had been invincible for 1,000 years, was defeated again and again by a woman's schemes. It was a huge irony. Now, this awkward situation was likely to change because of the kidnapping of the little emperor. De Xia needed a variable that could change the current unfavorable situation. In front of the northern Meng army, Fan Lingyue, who was still marching, received this news. Her expression immediately became gloomy and she immediately gave the order to set up camp. It was him. He was actually still alive. That ink sword was given by her. How could she not recognize it? She didn't expect that not only did he not die, but he also gave her such a big surprise. Military advisor, Qing Wuyo knelt on the ground with a pleading expression. Qing family has made a mistake. Naturally, they have to pay the price. I know what I'm doing. Also, tell Qing Wuhan to do her job well. Don't let the cat out of the bag, Fan Lingyue said coldly. Yes. Qing Wuyo sighed in her heart and accepted the order. In the barbarian dynasty, the barbarian king stood in the hall with a displeased expression. Not only was that kid not dead, but he had also caused such a huge commotion. Wild was holding a letter in her hand. As she read it, a happy smile appeared on her beautiful face. A man's way of thinking was always different from the average person. The things she paid attention to were also different. She only saw that he was at the 7th rank and that his legs had recovered. He's at the 7th rank. A man raised his head and gazed at his father. The barbarian king didn't react for a moment. After being stunned for a moment, he remembered the agreement between them. For a moment, he was even more upset. According to this kid's cultivation progress, peak rank 9 should not be too slow. Did that not mean that his precious daughter would soon leave him? How unpleasant. In the Weiyang Palace of the Great Xia, Zhang Sun and Qing Ning were stunned when they heard the news. They looked at each other and were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Without a doubt, this matter was definitely done by Ning Chen. There were many people in the world with crippled legs, but there were very few people who could fight so well while sitting in a wheelchair. Needless to say, no one but Ning Chen would do such a sinister and daring thing as standing up from the wheelchair to kidnap the little emperor of the northern Meng. Why did he go there? Zhang Sun couldn't understand. After King Yan took Ning Chen away for treatment, there had been no news of him. Who would have thought that once there was news, it would be such a shocking matter? Qing Ning couldn't answer either. No one in the world could understand that kid's way of thinking. It wouldn't be strange even if he blew up the northern Meng palace. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Emperor Xia read the intelligence sent by his spy. A smile gradually appeared on his gloomy face. After a moment, he actually laughed maniacally. The heavens were on Great Xia's side, the heavens were on Great Xia's side. Ning Chen and little Mingyu didn't know what the outside world was like. They were still walking hand in hand on the grasslands. The grasslands were bigger than the desert. The two of them walked until they were disgusted and still hadn't walked out. Mingyu was a little tired. She asked, "How long do we have to walk?" "Tired?" Ning Chen asked. "Yes," Mingyu said in annoyance. "Should I carry you?" Ning Chen suggested. Okay. Mingyu nodded without hesitation. Thus, Ning Chen carried little Mingyu on his back again. The little girl was very light. She didn't weigh much on his back. She probably wasn't even as heavy as his ink sword. Bad guy. Mingyu shouted. Yes, Ning Chen replied. He didn't agree with this nickname that the little girl gave him. How was he a bad guy? When we get to the Great Xia, you have to protect me. Mingyu said worriedly. Okay, Ning Chen nodded. I'm serious, Mingyu said. I'm serious too, Ning Chen replied. Mingyu hugged his neck tightly and said softly, Bad guy, you have to do what you say. If I'm taken away by others, I won't live anymore. She knew very well what would happen if she fell into the hands of others. When that time came, wanting to die would be an extravagant hope. She might as well end her own life. As long as I live. Ning Chen didn't say the rest. He was the one who rescued little Mingyu. Naturally, he would protect her. As long as he lived, no one could take her away. Mingyu understood the meaning behind Ning Chen's words. She put her little face on his back and quietly closed her eyes. She was a little tired and wanted to sleep for a while. Ning Chen temporarily slowed down his pace. After little Mingyu fell asleep, he quickened his pace again. At this moment, the sound of horse hooves and the creaking of wheels could be heard from afar. It came from the south and was gradually approaching. Ning Chen quickened his pace and quickly walked forward. If he guessed correctly, it should be a caravan heading north. As it turned out, this was indeed a caravan heading towards the northern Meng kingdom. When the manager of the caravan saw Ning Chen, he was a little surprised. In this boundless grassland, it was very easy to get lost and starve to death if one were to walk alone. Mingyu, wake up, Ning Chen called out softly. The little girl who had just fallen asleep was obviously very grumpy when she woke up. She pushed Ning Chen's face away unhappily and immediately buried her head back to sleep. Ning Chen had no choice but to give up. He smiled apologetically at the manager of the caravan and then requested to buy some food and clothes. When the manager of the caravan saw the big clothes draped over the little girl's body, he more or less understood what was going on. He took out a set of clothes that he had bought for his daughter and very kindly gave it to little Mingyu. Ning Chen was a little touched. However, at the same time, he couldn't help but lament that there were such kind people in every dynasty in the world. Why did they always have to fight? After the caravan had left, Ning Chen sighed softly and was about to continue his journey when he heard the rumbling sound of horse hooves coming from the southwest. It was very hurried and sounded like there were more than 20 horses. In the next moment, a cloud of dust rose as the horses passed by from afar, rushing north. Ning Chen didn't care at first, but after taking 2 steps, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. These people seemed to be heading towards the caravan just now. Thinking of this, Ning Chen immediately turned around and moved his feet, turning into a shadow and rushing forward. He hoped that his guess was wrong. Kill them. Take the women and the goods. Don't leave anything else behind. Just as Ning Chen arrived 100 steps away from the caravan, he heard a cold voice. The caravan was in chaos. No one had thought that they would run into horse bandits here. What merchants feared the most was horse bandits who killed and robbed. These people were inhumane and only knew how to burn, kill, and rob. However, just as the horse bandits were about to attack, a black light flashed and blood spurted out. Unfortunately, although the horse bandits were inhumane, they had run into Ning Chen, who was even more inhumane. Compared to killing, he was better at it. The black sword was as fast as the wind, mercilessly reaping the life of each horse bandit. Everyone only saw a blur before their eyes as a shadow flashed past. 27 horse bandits were all killed. I'll give the horses to you, said Ning Chen, then turned and left. Only then did the people in the caravan come back to their senses. They were all shocked. No one had thought that the young man just now was actually such a terrifying expert. kindness is rewarded. This was the thought that flashed through everyone's minds. If the consul hadn't kindly given the young man clothes and food, they probably wouldn't have been able to escape this disaster. Bad guy, you're really handsome, praised little Mingyu, who had woken up at some point. I've always been handsome. Ning Chen accepted the little girl's praise without hesitation. You were the most handsome just now, praised Mingyu. Ha, you really know how to talk, laughed Ning Chen. Can you walk on your own? Okay. Little Mingyu nodded and jumped down. Clothes. Ning Chen handed over the clothes the steward had given him. When Mingyu saw that it was a little girl's clothes, she hesitated. She had only worn men's clothes since she was young and had never worn women's clothes. Change into them, said Ning Chen softly. Mingyu made up her mind and took the clothes. She whispered, turn around. Ning Chen was speechless and obediently turned around. This little girl really knew how to be shy. Mingyu wrinkled her nose and made a funny face. She then took off her little dragon robe with a slightly red face and began to change her clothes. Don't turn around, shouted Mingyu worriedly. I won't turn around. Ning Chen helplessly replied. She wasn't a big girl, so what was there to be afraid of? After a while, little Mingyu finished changing her clothes. Her face was red as she whispered, okay, you can turn around now. Ning Chen turned around. When he saw her, his eyes couldn't help but light up. What a delicate little girl. Although little Mingyu also looked good in the dragon robe, because of the way she was dressed, she was more neutral. Now, little Mingyu's crown had been thrown away and she had changed into a girl's clothes. It was obvious that she was beginning to show the gentle beauty that a little girl should have. All in all, little Mingyu could still score above 90 points. Do I look good? Asked Mingyu a little embarrassedly. Yes, said Ning Chen honestly. You really know how to talk. Little Mingyu's eyes curved into crescent moons. Chapter 94. A day later, Ning Chen and little Mingyu finally left the grassland and arrived at a city in northern Mang. The two found an inn in the city, paid the tavern and went straight to the second floor. Ning Chen sat in the room in a daze. He needed to think carefully about what to do after returning to Great Xia. Now that he had little Mingyu with him, he would definitely be hunted down by countless forces, especially Emperor Xia, who would definitely be even crazier this time. Little Mingyu didn't care so much. She lay on the bed and slept. After walking for so many days, she was already exhausted. Ning Chen was a little worried. He knew that he couldn't hide his identity for long. Besides Northern Mang, there were at least 4 people who had already guessed that he was the one who kidnapped the little emperor. Zhang Sun, Barbarian King, Fan Lingyue, and Emperor Xia. In this world, there would always be enemies among those who understood you the most. Fan Lingyue and Emperor Xia were the best examples. Fan Lingyue was still fine, but little Mingyu was in his hands and would definitely have some scruples. Now, his greatest enemy was Emperor Xia. Once this lunatic went crazy, he would do anything. He didn't doubt that Emperor Xia had already set up an inescapable net for him to jump into. Last time, it was the Dark Shadow Squad. This time, it would probably be the Dark Dragon Squad. The lowest cultivation of the Dark Dragon Squad in Great Xia was at least the 8th grade. As for the captain, the lowest was the 9th grade or even the peak of the 9th grade. Last time, Prince Yen blocked a 9th grade Dark Dragon Squad for him. This time, he might not be so lucky. Now, he could barely deal with one 9th grade expert. If there were more, he would have to risk his life. He didn't want to risk his life, so he had to think of a way to avoid the pursuit of the Dark Dragon Squad. At this moment, he and little Mingyu were in northern Mang, and no one could recognize him. However, it was hard to say in Great Xia. Back then, when he fought the emissary of the true extreme state in the palace, many people had seen him. Many of the Shadow Dragon guards who were hiding in the dark probably remembered his appearance. Great Xia and Northern Meng bordered each other. After Beijiang Plains, it was Great Xia's Yangue City and Xingqiao Pass. Yangue City was now occupied by the Northern Meng army, so it was impossible to go there. As for Xingqiao Pass, there would be countless people waiting for him to die. This was the most dangerous choice, but also the only choice. The only thing he was glad about now was that little Mingyu was a girl, which made things a lot easier for him. Everyone in the world knew that the little emperor of Northern Meng had been kidnapped. Therefore, Qing dynasty would definitely check all the strangers who brought along a 7- or 8-year-old boy. As for the middle-aged man who brought along a little girl, no one would have the time to care about him. Thinking of this, Ning Chen got up and prepared to go out by himself. He was not worried that little Mingyu would run away. This little girl was very smart and knew that there were more people in the world who wanted to capture her than save her. In this world, there were only 3 places where little Mingyu would be the safest: Beimeng Imperial Palace, Fan Lingyue's side, and his side. Beimeng City wasn't as prosperous as Great Xia. Ning Chen spent a long time searching before he finally found what he wanted. After returning to his room, he fiddled with the mirror. However, disguising himself was not an easy task. Ning Chen spent nearly 4 hours trying, but he still did not achieve the desired effect. "You're so stupid." Little Mingyu had woken up at some point and was sitting on the bed, curling her lips. She finally knew why the bad guy had disguised himself to be so ugly. It was not intentional. He was only at this level. Ning Chen was slightly ashamed. It was indeed embarrassing to be looked down upon by a little girl. Looking at his 2 hands, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. As expected, they looked like feet. "I'll help you." Mingyu put on her shoes and jumped off the bed. She walked to the front, took over the skin wax, rubber, blades, and other tools, and carefully cleaned up Ning Chen's face. "What do you want me to look like?" "Just look a little older." As he spoke, Ning Chen sat there, not daring to move. He was afraid that little Mingyu would accidentally disfigure him with a blade. Mingyu understood tacitly. Her little face was extremely focused as she used the tools in her hands to dress him up bit by bit. After the little girl had washed up, there was a faint milky fragrance on her body. It was very comfortable to smell and made people feel at ease. This proved that when it came to makeup, women would always be better than men. After an hour, little Mingyu clapped her hands and took half a step back. She said with satisfaction, "Take a look yourself." Ning Chen turned around and looked at the mirror on the table. He sighed in his heart. Comparing goods, throwing away, comparing hands, chopping. How could little Mingyu be so clever with her hands? The middle-aged man in the mirror had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. There were faint lines at the corners of his eyes, but it did not affect the overall appearance. Instead, it gave people a mature feeling. In short, there was only one word to describe him: handsome. Amazing. Ning Chen gave a thumbs up and praised. Of course. Little Mingyu didn't know what modesty was and naturally accepted the praise. After waiting for a while, the rubber on his face was almost dry. Ning Chen carefully tore off the mask and put it away. Then, he looked at the gradually darkening sky outside and asked, "Are you hungry? Do you want to eat in or go out?" "Let's go out and eat." Mingyu thought for a while and stretched out her little hand. Ning Chen naturally took the little girl's hand and walked downstairs to the main hall. At this time, it was dinner time. The tables downstairs were basically all full. There was only one empty table left. The two went up and sat down, then called the waiter to order. Ning Chen was not picky about food, but little Mingyu was very picky. It was no wonder. She had been an emperor since she was young and was tired of eating all kinds of delicacies. It was hard not to be picky. After the dishes were served, Mingyu didn't want to eat anymore after a few bites. She put down her chopsticks and said, "It doesn't taste good." Ning Chen's head hurt. If it didn't taste good, what could he do? Roast the fish for me to eat. Mingyu continued to say pitifully. Ning Chen nodded helplessly and said, "Okay, wait here. Don't run around." After saying that, Ning Chen got up and walked towards the kitchen of the inn. There should be fish in the kitchen. He would buy it himself and roast it for little Mingyu. The kitchen was not far from the main hall. After Ning Chen went in, he stated his purpose for coming. The head chef readily agreed. This was not something excessive. It was difficult to please everyone. No matter how good a chef was, he could not guarantee that everyone would like to eat the dishes he made. Ning Chen gratefully paid the money and grabbed a fish. After carefully cleaning it, he borrowed a stove and carefully roasted it. "Is that little girl your younger sister?" the chef asked as he cooked the dishes. "Yes," Ning Chen replied. "You're a good person," the head chef said seriously. "Ha!" Ning Chen chuckled and didn't say anything. If he was a good person, then there would be no bad people in the world. He was never a good person. He was just being himself. "I also have a little sister. She's 3 years younger than me. When she was young, she was very naughty. Once, I couldn't help but hit her. Mother taught me that the reason why an older brother should be born before his younger sister is because he needs to grow up faster so that he can protect his younger sister. From then on, I never fought with my younger sister again." Unfortunately. The head chef's face darkened. He sighed and didn't say anything else. "My condolences." Ning Chen's expression was calm as he slowly said, "I'm fine. It's been many years." The head chef wiped his wet eyes and forced a smile. "Treat her well. She's not a burden, but an honor in this life." The head chef's voice was slightly hoarse. "I definitely will." Ning Chen nodded. The fish was quickly cooked. Ning Chen thanked the head chef and then took the fish to the front hall. Little Mingyu was probably impatient from waiting. However, just as Ning Chen was about to enter the hall, he suddenly heard the sound of bowls and plates shattering. Feeling that something was wrong, he quickly walked over. When he arrived at the front of the hall and saw the scene inside, his expression immediately darkened. At the table before them were 3 finely dressed youths and a scantily clad woman. Little Mingyu stubbornly stood to the side, unwilling to leave. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. Ning Chen's anger immediately overflowed. He calmly walked forward. Just as he was about to speak, his eyes narrowed. Only then did he notice that there were 5 red fingerprints on Mingyu's face. Unable to suppress the anger in his heart, Ning Chen coldly swept his gaze over the surrounding people who were still eating and watching the show. He icily said, "Everyone, please leave. I'm going to kill someone." The hall was in an uproar. Some people ridiculed him, while others felt that the atmosphere wasn't going to subside and quickly left. However, the majority of people stayed. Ning Chen no longer paid attention to them. He had already warned them. Bang! In the next moment, a white figure flashed. Ning Chen went forward and sent the table flying with a palm strike. At the same time, he directly stepped on one of the youth's face. He revealed his killing intent. "Speak, who did it just now?" "Impudent. Do you know who I am?" The youth struggled on the ground with a pained expression. "I don't care who you are. Even if the heavens came today, they wouldn't be able to save you." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen kicked the young man and sent him flying. With a loud bang, blood spurted out of the young man's mouth and splattered 10 meters away. "It's your turn. Speak, who did it?" Ning Chen coldly said as he grabbed the other blue-clothed youth. The blue-clothed youth's face was filled with fear. He trembled. "You," however, before he could finish his sentence, Ning Chen sent another kick flying. The hall was dyed red once more. "It's her." The last youth saw Ning Chen look over and immediately pointed at the woman beside him. The woman was shocked. Just as she was about to deny it, Ning Chen grabbed her throat. Speak, who did it? The dangerous light in Ning Chen's eyes grew stronger and stronger. The woman continued to struggle, but she wasn't willing to speak. Ning Chen coldly laughed and slowly tightened his grip. He liked stubborn people the most. The woman only felt that it was getting more and more difficult to breathe. Under the desire to live, she unconsciously raised her left hand and said with difficulty, this hand, crack. As soon as she said that, everyone in the hall heard a crack. In the next moment, what they saw was a broken arm. The white bone pierced through the flesh and blood, looking extremely frightening. Several people in the hall couldn't help but vomit. Their faces were pale from fright. Chapter 95. In front of Ning Chen, the woman's expression was twisted. She struggled violently, but she couldn't say a word because her throat was being choked. Blood gushed out from the severed arm. It was a shocking sight. At this moment, a Buddhist sigh sounded, benefactor, where it is possible to let people off, one should spare them. Please stop. This sudden voice attracted everyone's attention. Looking over, they saw a plainclothed monk appear in front of the door. He looked young and benevolent as he slowly walked over. On what basis? Ning Chen turned his head and asked indifferently. The heavens are benevolent. I hope young master can be merciful. The plain-clothed monk stopped and bowed. The heavens are benevolent. That's their business. What does it have to do with me? Ning Chen grabbed the woman's other arm and snapped it. Blood flowed out once more. She slapped Mingyu, so I broke both her arms. It's fair and just. What can the heavens say? Ning Chen's cold eyes and emotionless words provoked everyone present. Ning Chen's face was cold and terrifying, causing people to involuntarily shiver. Amitabha. Benefactor, your killing intent is too strong. You've already become a demon. I can't allow you to continue wreaking havoc in the world. The plain-clothed monk's body moved and he stretched out his hand to make a move. Immediately, a strong wind blew towards Yishuan. Yishuan was stunned. Clang! The black sword came out of its sheath and blocked the Buddhist palm. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed and he slowly said, Unbreakable Vajrabhati. The plain-clothed monk's Buddhist palm wasn't injured at all. It was as hard as steel. You're a disciple of Du-Yi Temple. Ning Chen's expression sank. His luck was really good. He had met another peak Xintian successor. Why would someone from that broken temple appear here? I, Wu Ju, will eliminate this demon for the world today. Wu Ju's palm moved, and the sound of Sanskrit rang out. The golden Buddhist light around him was as brilliant as a saint, illuminating everything within 100 jang. Buddhist sacred art, Tathagata illuminates the heavens. Idiot! Ning Chen snorted coldly. His black sword condensed into frost and stabbed toward the former's eyes. Wu Ju frowned and raised his palm to block the black sword, but his Buddhist technique was interrupted. Ning Chen's sword turned around and attacked Wu Ju's eyes, forcing the latter to retreat again and again. Treacherous, evil, and arrogant. How can Wu Ju tolerate you? As soon as he finished speaking, the Buddha closed his eyes. Golden light shone brightly, and the sound of Sanskrit filled the sky. A solemn holy Buddha statue appeared behind him. It was the move of the Buddha in the past. Ning Chen focused. His sword drew the frost and snowflakes in the air. His whole body was raised to its peak. Boom! The two moves collided and golden light illuminated the world. However, the ink-colored brilliance broke through the golden light and directly pierced towards Wu Ju's right eye. With his eyes closed, Ning Chen could not move an inch forward. He flipped his right palm and let go of the sword in his hand. Then, he pushed his palm towards the end of the ink sword. With a bang, the Buddha retreated. A drop of dark red blood quietly dripped down from his eyelids. The golden body had already been broken, and the silver sword chi instantly entered. Wu Ju's body trembled, and his mouth was dyed red. Righteous Buddha, where is your Buddha now? Ning Chen sent the former flying with his sword and asked coldly. Jia Wu retreated more than 10 steps and vomited a mouthful of blood. After an instant, he became dispirited. The devil showed mercy, but the Buddha found it difficult to do so. This was the greatest insult to the Buddha. Where had the Buddha of this world cultivated to? Clang, the ink sword returned to its sheath. Ning Chen glanced at the people around him and left a silver ingot to the shopkeeper. Then, he pulled little Mingyu upstairs. With a bang, the door closed. Ning Chen staggered and blood spilled from his mouth. What happened to you? Mingyu was shocked. She hurriedly supported him and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Ning Chen forced a smile. What a powerful Buddhist move. What a powerful indestructible body. If not for this little monk's lack of battle experience, it would have been hard to predict who would have won today. As expected, the monks of the Du-Yi temple were not easy to deal with. It was no wonder that a martial Marquis of the Xia kingdom was guarding there. Ning Chen closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing for a moment, forcibly suppressing his injuries. After a long time, he slowly opened his eyes. In front of him, little Mingyu's eyes were still filled with worry. The handprint on her face was also becoming more and more obvious. Ning Chen's heart flashed with self-blame. He had said that he would protect her, but he had let her suffer so much. Does it still hurt? Ning Chen carefully caressed the little girl's delicate face and gently asked. It doesn't hurt anymore. Mingyu shook her head and replied. I've let you suffer, Ning Chen said apologetically. It's fine. Mingyu bit her lips and held back her tears. Ning Chen gently pulled the little girl into his embrace and firmly promised, there won't be a next time. Okay. Mingyu finally couldn't hold back her tears. The empress of a dynasty was being humiliated here. The little girl had endured it for a long time. Ning Chen lightly sighed. He felt very uncomfortable. I almost forgot. Your fish. Ning Chen took out the grilled fish from his bosom. Fortunately, it hadn't turned cold yet. Mingyu got up from his embrace and smiled through her tears. She took the already flattened grilled fish and ate it like it was a treasure. Ning Chen pulled the little girl to the bed and had her sit on it. He sat down and immediately activated the life scroll. A silver light flowed from his left hand and entered the handprint on little Mingyu's face. Mingyu only felt a cool sensation on her face. The burning pain from before quickly lessened by a lot. Ning Chen took out an amulet from his bosom and put it around the little girl's neck. This was something he had when he woke up. It was tied together with the moon-shaped jade pendant. Zhang Sun must have put it on him when he was unconscious. Now that he had no use for it, he gave it to little Mingyu as a small gift. Tomorrow, we'll be going to Grand Xia. It might be dangerous, but I'll protect you, Ning Chen said softly. Okay. Mingyu didn't refute. She knew that Ning Chen wouldn't change his mind. Although he was very good to her and was even obedient to her, when it came to matters of principle, he definitely wouldn't compromise. Quickly go to sleep. We still have to hurry tomorrow morning, Ning Chen said as he rubbed the little girl's hair. Okay. Mingyu obediently lay down and closed her eyes. Ning Chen walked to the side and extinguished the candle. Soon after, he walked over to a table not far from the bed and sat down. After today's battle, he discovered that he was still barely able to fight against these Xiantian successors. The number of moves he had learned was too few. He only had one move that Jian Consecrator had taught him. There was one move in the life scroll. Unfortunately, he hadn't learned it. And even if he did, he wouldn't be able to use it. The price was too great. He couldn't bear it. As for the other heavenly scroll, the dust scroll, the requirements for the moves recorded in it were too high. Unless one was a Xiantian, they couldn't be of any help to him. For now, if he wanted to increase his strength as quickly as possible, the best way was to obtain as many moves as possible. This wasn't an easy task. The majority of the world's cultivation methods were controlled by various powers. If he wanted to obtain them, he would have to pay a hefty price. In this world, the only person he had never seen other people's moves was Prince Yen. With Senior's talent, he didn't need to learn other people's moves. All of his moves were created by himself. Thinking of this, Ning Chen suddenly remembered the two shocking sword auras he saw in the desert that day. One of them must have belonged to Senior. Thinking about it carefully, he could roughly deduce the other one. In this world, only the sword in Sword City was comparable to a Xiantian expert. Senior went to the desert to find a sand sword. It was very likely that the sword in Sword City was also there for the same purpose. It was just that he didn't know how Senior was doing now. He said that he would look for him after he found the sand sword. But until now, Senior still hadn't appeared. He didn't doubt Senior's strength. However, the sword in Sword City was comparable to the 5 strongest Xiantian experts in the world. He couldn't help but be worried. After returning to the Great Xia, he would try his best to find out more about Senior. If he really couldn't, he would have to ask Zhang Sun for help. The night passed quickly. The next morning, little Mingyu woke up and the two of them set off. Mingyu didn't want to go to the Great Xia so quickly. Most of the time, she wanted to walk by herself. Ning Chen also let her be. Only when the little girl was tired, he would carry her on his back and speed up. The speed of a 7th-grade martial artist when rushing at full speed was very frightening. Moreover, Ning Chen had cultivated the life scroll and his foundation was unparalleled in the world. His Zhen-Qi recovery speed was much faster than ordinary 7th-grade martial artists. He basically didn't need to rest along the way. After 2 days and 1 night, even if little Mingyu didn't cooperate, the two of them still arrived at the border between the two dynasties, Beizhang Plains. This was the place where the war between the two dynasties took place. Broken spears and flags could be seen everywhere. Too many corpses of Great Xia soldiers were buried in the hundreds of miles of Beizhang Plains. The lonely night was cold and the cold moon shone alone. The night in Beizhang Plains was frighteningly cold. The cold wind whistled and the yin qi was bone-chilling. Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand as they walked through the northern plains. He looked at the corpses of the soldiers that littered the ground. Out of 100,000 soldiers, only less than 40,000 were left. It was an unbelievable defeat, turning the northern plains into a land of no return. The two of them silently walked in the city, their hearts gradually sinking. Step by step, they only saw broken spears and young faces. There was no fear of death, only reluctance to part with their loved ones. My blood, my bones, from now on, may the heavens take pity on me. I hope that after death, I will become a war spirit and protect the land of Great Xia forever. Beside the fallen general, 27 words were written in blood on a broken flag. Ning Chen silently bent down and picked up the blood-stained flag, his heart heavy. Beiwu Marquis deserves to die. Ning Chen's hands cracked. The corpses of tens of thousands of soldiers could not be buried. Beiwu Marquis' sins could not be redeemed even with 10,000 deaths. Little Mingyu was silent. She took in the bleakness in her eyes. Facing the soldiers who used their lives to protect the land behind them, all words seemed to pale in comparison. All differences in standpoints, all schemes had disappeared along with the lives that had been lost. All that was left was the deepest respect for the soldiers who used their blood to protect their country. There shouldn't be war. Mingyu said softly. If you are in power, you have to worry about the people. I don't know if the division between countries is right or wrong, but the existence of war is definitely wrong. Ning Chen said solemnly. Mingyu nodded, taking Ning Chen's words into her heart. Chapter 96. Little Mingyu was not used to the coldness of Beizhang Plain, so Ning Chen carried her on his back and left quickly. He planted a seed of peace for little Mingyu, hoping that one day, she would grow stronger. He could not change Fan Lingyue, so he could only try to change the future ruler of Beimang. The world had been ravaged by war for too long and could not continue fighting. After passing through Beizhang Plain, Great Xia's Xingqiao Pass was not far away. Ning Chen and little Mingyu walked for an entire night and finally reached their destination before noon the next day. Ning Chen put on the mask that he had prepared beforehand and disguised himself as a middle-aged man. He held little Mingyu's hand and openly walked into Xingqiao Pass. Xingqiao Pass was currently guarded by Marquis Qinghe. Before the war between the two dynasties ended, this Marquis with the highest seniority in Great Xia would continue to guard this place. Great Xia had already lost Yangue City and could not afford to lose Xingqiao Pass. After Ning Chen arrived at Xingqiao Pass, he first brought little Mingyu to an inn and then asked the little girl to make a mask for him. "Where are you going?" Mingyu asked curiously as she helped the bad guy with his makeup. "To the Marquis government," Ning Chen said honestly. The old Marquis of Xingqiao Pass was Zhang Suan's father. He had received too much kindness from Zhang Suan's family. Since he was here, he had to pay him a visit. "Oh," Mingyu nodded and did not ask further. Once she heard this, she knew very well that she could not follow. "Be careful," Mingyu reminded him. "I'm fine," Ning Chen replied calmly. Although he heard that the old Marquis was somewhat old-fashioned, he could not be impolite this time. After the mask was done, it would take about an hour to dry. Ning Chen calmed down and thought for a while before taking out a brush and ink. He took out the moon-shaped jade pendant and dipped it in the ink before gently imprinting it on the paper. Mingyu's face was filled with worry. She had a feeling that the bad guy's trip would not go smoothly. Ning Chen saw the worry in the little girl's eyes and reached out to rub her hair. He said softly, "Don't worry, nothing will happen." After waiting for a while, Ning Chen took off the mask on his face and changed into his original middle-aged appearance. He then got up and walked out of the door. "Wait for me to return." Ning Chen left with a solemn expression. He hoped that nothing bad would happen to him. The temporary Wuhou government in the Qing dynasty pass was about an hour's journey from the inn. Before Ning Chen reached the Wuhou government, he purposely found a secluded place to change his mask. When he appeared again, he was already an ordinary-looking young man. After half an hour, Ning Chen finally arrived at the Wuhou government. In front of the government, there were two guards dressed in battle armor, standing upright. "I have a matter to discuss with the Marshal Marquis. I hope that the general can pass the message on my behalf." Ning Chen took out the letter in his hand and handed it over to one of the guards as he spoke politely. "Wait here." The guard took the letter. He didn't say anything superfluous and didn't make things difficult for him. He turned around and walked into the mansion. A moment later, the guard returned and respectfully said, "The Marquis invites you in." Ning Chen thanked the guard and walked into the Wuhou government. In the main hall of the Marquis Manor, Marquis Qinghe sat quietly on the main seat. His face was slightly aged and he looked to be in his 50s. However, he had a righteous aura that was very oppressive. "You're Ning Chen?" Marquis Clear River sized up the young man before him and spoke calmly. "That's right." Ning Chen nodded. "You don't look like the portrait that Wu Yu gave me. Take off the mask." Marquis Qinghe said indifferently. "Ah, as expected, I can't hide from the Marquis." Ning Chen removed the mask and revealed his true face. He then respectfully bowed. "Junior Ning Chen greets the Marquis." "Not bad." Marquis Qinghe nodded. His calmness had a trace of praise. "You were the one who kidnapped Northern Meng's young emperor, right?" Marquis Qinghe's tone didn't have much surprise as he asked. "Yes." Ning Chen did not deny it and nodded. "There are two letters here. One is from His Majesty and the other is from Wu Yu. Take a look." While speaking, Marquis Qinghe's hand moved and the two letters turned into a stream of light that flew towards Ning Chen. Ning Chen received the two letters. After opening them, he read them one by one. There was no change in his expression. He already knew the attitude of Emperor Xia and Chang Sunday. Now that he read it again, he wouldn't be surprised. Emperor Xia's letter clearly stated that once he was discovered to have entered Xingqiao Pass, he was to immediately stop him at all costs, regardless of life or death. As for Northern Meng's young emperor, he had to be sent back to the imperial city alive. As expected, Chang Sun's letter tactfully begged for mercy. Between the words and the brush, he did his best to ask for Ning Chen to hand over the young emperor voluntarily. Finally, he repeatedly warned his father not to use force. The two letters with completely different tones represented the final attitude of the current emperor and empress of the Grand Xia. This was unfortunate for Ning Chen, but also an honor. "What are your thoughts?" Marquis Qinghe asked. "I don't have any thoughts. I already expected this." Ning Chen waved his hand and returned the letter. "This is Emperor Xia's world. His Majesty's words are imperial edicts. This is Grand Xia's world, not Emperor Xia's. As for imperial edicts, they are meaningless to me," Ning Chen said coldly. "Outrageous." Marquis Qinghe's expression immediately sank. He coldly snorted and said, "Men, capture this brat for me." "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, the four generals entered and quickly surrounded Ning Chen. "Senior Marquis, I only came to visit you because you are the Empress' father. This is my due courtesy. However, that doesn't mean that I will give up without a fight." Ning Chen's expression also sank. "Then let me see what you're capable of. Attack!" Marquis Qinghe shouted coldly. Clang, clang. The four generals unsheathed their swords, and a powerful stench of blood wafted out. These generals who had been through hundreds of battles were abnormally powerful. Each one of them was at least at rank 8. Ning Chen's expression became extremely grave. His feet moved, and he took the initiative to attack. His figure flashed, and the black sword wrapped in cloth appeared behind him. His sword light slashed down towards one of the generals. Bang! The swords and sabers collided. Ning Chen used his peerless foundation to force the general back half a step. However, at the same time, 3 sword lights arrived behind him. He couldn't get away in that half a step. Ning Chen's body trembled. His sword light turned around and knocked away 2 of the sword lights. The powerful backlash caused his blood and qi to churn. The final attack was unavoidable. Ning Chen's left hand formed a sword finger. True qi overflowed, and he met the general's attack head-on. The 2 sword fingers collided. Ning Chen was unable to use the power of the sword qi. The sword qi entered his body, and blood flowed out of his mouth. Seeing that there was no advantage in this prolonged battle, Ning Chen made a prompt decision. His sword moved, and snow filled the sky. He raised his cultivation to its peak. Flying swan feather, one sword of heaven and earth. His sword was as fast as lightning, and it once more shot towards the general who had already retreated half a step. Then with a boom, the general received the attack and retreated several steps. Ning Chen took a step forward, wanting to leave. However, at this moment, Marquis Qinghe attacked. His body was like a streak of light, and he instantly arrived in front of Ning Chen. His finger pierced through his forehead. Bang! Ning Chen's body trembled, and he was suddenly sent flying. He vomited blood, and it dyed the sky. In this moment of life and death, Ning Chen forcefully endured the pain all over his body. He took a step forward, and using the remaining force, he turned and rushed out of the Marquis estate. Chase him. We must capture him alive and ask him where the Northern Meng Emperor is. Marquis Qinghe's face sunk. Yes. The 4 generals accepted the order and quickly chased after him. Seeing the 4 of them disappear, Marquis Qinghe glanced at the darkness and sighed. He then turned and walked into the hall. Wuyo, this is all your father can do. The rest will depend on his own luck. Ning Chen immediately put on his mask after escaping the Marquis estate. Blood continuously flowed from his mouth as he staggered toward the crowd. The 4 generals followed closely behind him. They chased him for over 10 streets, but they lost him in front of an inn. "Go in and search," said one of the generals. "Yes." The remaining 3 generals nodded and walked in together. The inn's manager was just about to stop them, but when he saw that it was the 4 armored generals, he immediately shut his mouth. On the 2nd floor, the door to a room was pushed open with a bang. Little Mingyue jumped in fright, but when she saw that it was Ning Chen, she let out a sigh of relief. "There will be people coming in a bit. Help me cover up." Ning Chen endured his injuries and quickly said, "Okay." Mingyue saw that his expression was not right and quickly agreed. Ning Chen quickly took off his outer clothes and stuffed them into the bedside cabinet. Then, he lay down on the bed. Dang dang. The next moment, there was a knock on the door. Before little Mingyue could open the door, a general pushed the door open and entered. "Sir, sir." Mingyue pretended to panic and took 2 steps back as she spoke timidly. The general saw that it was a little girl and frowned. He walked into the room and looked around. When he saw the pale and sickly middle-aged man on the bed, he dispelled his doubts and turned to leave. Mingyue closed the door. Just as she walked to the bedside, she saw Ning Chen spit out a mouthful of blood. He covered his mouth and coughed. "What's wrong? Don't scare me." Little Mingyue panicked. She used her sleeve to wipe the blood from his mouth, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not wipe it all away. Marquis Qinghe did not hold back in his last move. There were too many spies in the Marquis estate, so he could not hold back. "I'm fine." Ning Chen gently pushed little Mingyue away and sat on the bed to rest. When he attacked just now, he really thought that he might not be able to come back. He thought that the conversation would not go smoothly and might even end on bad terms. However, on account of Zhang Sun, Marquis Qinghe would not be too ruthless. He did not expect Marquis Qinghe's attitude to be so intense. It was only after that finger attack that he instantly understood that Marquis Qinghe was acting for the people in the dark. That finger attack did not hold back, but there were many more things. The cultivation technique of Zhang Sun's lineage and the old Marquis's 10 years of cultivation. This was already his limit. The old Marquis was at the peak of rank 9 and was even a half-step in born expert. 10 years of cultivation was enough to forcefully raise an ordinary person without any foundation above rank 5. In his dantian, the 2 cyclones were constantly devouring the endless energy that was pouring in. Ning Chen's cultivation was also constantly rising. Late stage rank 7, peak rank 7, early stage rank 8, mid stage rank 8, late stage rank 8, peak rank 8. However, just as his cultivation was about to break through to rank 9, Ning Chen forcefully stopped the expansion of the cyclones and forcefully suppressed his realm. He could not break through to rank 9 yet. Otherwise, his foundation would be unstable and it would affect his future cultivation. After a moment, Ning Chen slowly opened his eyes and sighed in his heart. The old Marquis had given him too much of a favor. Chapter 97. Marquis Qinghe's loyalty to Great Xia had never been doubted. This old Marquis was bestowed the title of Marquis by the late emperor. He had spent his entire life guarding the borders of Great Xia and had worked hard without any complaints. The peace of de Xia was fought for by generations of martial marquises. The borders of de Xia were too big. If not for these martial marquises, they would have been trampled into a wasteland by the cavalry of other dynasties. As the only surviving martial marquis of the previous generation, Marquis Qinghe's prestige in de Xia was unparalleled. Even Marquis Kaixuan, who was the head of the 10 martial marquises, could not compare. However, Emperor Xia's recent actions had chilled the heart of this old Marquis. Marquis government. Marquis Qinghe stood in the middle of the hall. In front of him, 4 generals were kneeling, looking ashamed. Forfeit your salary for 3 months. Go back, Marquis Qinghe said indifferently. Yes. The 4 generals bowed respectfully, then stood up and left. After the 4 of them left, Marquis Qinghe quietly looked out of Marquis government. His calm eyes flashed with deep fatigue. De Xia, who had been invincible for 1,000 years, had fallen to the point where they had to rely on a young man to support them. How sad, how laughable. He knew from Wuyo that Ning Chen had already sent the news of Marquis Beiwu's betrayal to the imperial city. However, he did not expect that Emperor Xia, in order to lure out the rebel forces within De Xia, would watch as Yangue city was destroyed. In the end, the 170,000 soldiers and millions of civilians were completely slaughtered by the northern Meng army. It could be said that half of De Xia's precarious situation was caused by Emperor Xia's own hands. As a subject, he had to be loyal to Emperor Xia. However, he was even more loyal to De Xia that he had protected for his entire life. He was very clear about what Ning Chen had done. It could even be said that if not for this young man, De Xia would be in an even worse state in this war. He believed in his own judgment, and even more so in his daughter's judgment of people. Therefore, he was willing to take a gamble. 10 years of cultivation was nothing to him. He would not be able to enter the Xiantian realm in this lifetime. He might as well help this young man this once. He only hoped that his decision this time would bring new hope to De Xia, and not the beginning of destruction. Ning Chen didn't know what the old Marquis was thinking, but he knew that he owed him a favor that could never be repaid. 10 years of cultivation was not something that any martial artist could casually give up, not to mention that the old Marquis was already very old. Losing 10 years of cultivation would definitely cause great damage to his vitality and even cause permanent damage to his own foundation. Mingyu had been quietly guarding by the bedside, her delicate little face filled with worry. It's fine now. Ning Chen woke up from his meditation and rubbed the little girl's hair. Although the injuries on his body were not light, they were nothing compared to what he had obtained. He couldn't stay in this any longer. He and little Mingyue had to leave as soon as possible. He had wasted a lot of time recuperating, and the sky outside was gradually darkening. However, this was a good thing for them. Every day at this time was the time when people who left early and returned late returned home. There were relatively more pedestrians on the streets. In addition, the sky was dark, which made it more convenient for them to leave. Let's go. Thinking of this, Ning Chen put on his coat, held Mingyu's hand, and walked out of the door. Along the way, the pedestrians walked back and forth. The 2 of them didn't stand out as they walked, and soon disappeared into the night. In the next 2 days, the Qing dynasty pass was under martial law. The places where Ning Chen had appeared were checked over and over again. No one knew that Ning Chen had brought little Mingyue to another city 300 li away from the Qing dynasty pass, and they had stayed there for 5 days. His injuries couldn't be delayed any longer. He had to calm down and heal. Moreover, he needed time to cultivate the cultivation method that the old Marquis had given him. This was the martial arts of the Zhangsun branch. There were mental cultivation methods and moves. He didn't lack mental cultivation methods. What he lacked was the method to cultivate the moves. There were very few sword moves in the martial arts of the Zhangsun branch. Moreover, the old Marquis and the Marquis of Taiping weren't sword users. Fortunately, he didn't have to learn sword moves. He wasn't a sword fanatic like Prince Yan. He didn't mind learning any martial arts as long as it was useful. In the path of martial arts, the most taboo was to be impatient. Ning Chen didn't dare to learn too much. He only chose one sword move and one of the 3 palms. The old Marquis only taught one sword move and 3 palms. He was probably afraid that Ning Chen was young and impetuous and would be greedy. Any martial arts in the world had its unique way of cultivating. Ning Chen spent 5 days healing and cultivating before he had a preliminary grasp of the sword move and the palm move. 5 days later, Ning Chen took little Mingyue on the road again. They needed to get to the Heaven's Gate as soon as possible. After another 3 days, the two of them came to 5 li away from the Heaven's Gate and stopped moving forward. Ning Chen looked at the mighty Great Xia pass in front of him, knowing that this was the last problem in front of him. It was definitely impossible to force their way through. Fan Lingyue must have left a real powerhouse in this extremely important place. If they forced their way through, they would only be courting death. The only choice was to pass through the Qizhou mountain range on both sides of the Heaven's Gate. The Qizhou mountain range stretched for nearly 10,000 li, forcibly dividing the territory of the Great Xia into 2 halves. The place where the Heaven's Gate was located was the most gentle of the mountains, but it still took a lot of manpower and material resources of the Great Xia to build. The Qizhou mountain range was a true primitive land. Very few people dared to set foot in it. However, Ning Chen had no choice but to pass through it. Are you scared? Ning Chen looked at the little girl beside him and asked. No. Mingyue nodded firmly. She was the empress of the northern Meng, how could she be scared by such a small difficulty? Good job. Ning Chen gave her a thumbs up. As they spoke, the two of them had already set foot on the road across the Qizhou mountain range. The mountain road was rugged and every step was very difficult. The little girl's body was still very weak. She would be exhausted after a few steps, so most of the time, Ning Chen carried her on his back. The primitive land was tens of thousands of li long, rolling up and down on the ground. Ancient trees were coiled up, covering the sky and the sun. There were also old roots that were intertwined, spreading horizontally and vertically, overflowing with the aura of time. This was a divine land that had gathered the essence of heaven and earth, nourished for tens of thousands of years. It had existed since ancient times. From time to time, there would be the roars of giant beasts and the cries of hundreds of birds. It was full of vitality. There was also a dense fog that rose and fell, flickering, and its source could not be seen. It was somewhat mysterious and unpredictable. The cold moon hung in the sky, bright and clear. Gusts of cold wind blew gently, rustling the branches and leaves. The whole mountain range was gloomy and somewhat scary. Even the roars of beasts could not hide the loneliness of eternity. Are you cold? Ning Chen asked softly as they walked on the mountain road. No. Mingyue leaned on his back and gently shook her head. The bad guy's body was very warm, and she was wearing very thick clothes. If you're tired, sleep for a while. We still have a long way to go. Ning Chen said. Okay. Mingyue replied, but she was not sleepy. Her pearl-like eyes were wide open. Do you want me to tell you a story? After walking for a while, Ning Chen saw that little Mingyue was still not sleepy. He was afraid that she would be bored, so he suggested. Okay. Mingyue nodded, agreeing wholeheartedly. I'll tell you a story about Snow White. Ning Chen recalled carefully. He did not know if he could still remember everything after not telling it for so many years. Once upon a time, there was a king. The beginning of the story was very vulgar, the middle was very complicated, but the ending was very beautiful. It was a typical fairy tale of a prince, a princess, and a bad guy. Ning Chen's mouth could even make dead things come alive, let alone telling a story. Little Mingyue was very engrossed in the story. Ning Chen smiled in his heart. She was a little girl after all. Does Fan Lingyue look like that bad queen? Ning Chen took the opportunity to instill in little Mingyue the idea that Fan Lingyue was a bad guy. You're the bad guy. Sister Lingyue is a good person. Little Mingyue's ability to distinguish right from wrong was very strong. She could tell Ning Chen's intention at a glance. She pouted and replied. Ning Chen rubbed his nose helplessly. His strategy had failed, and there was room for improvement. If Fan Lingyue and I fell into the water together, who would you save first? Ning Chen once again took out his trump card. Sister Lingyue. Little Mingyue said without hesitation. I doted on you for nothing. Ning Chen was very hurt. The little girl answered too quickly. It would have been good even if she pretended to hesitate. Your martial arts are so good, you can last for a long time. Sister Lingyue doesn't know martial arts, so I must save Sister Lingyue first. Mingyue hugged the bad guy's arms tightly and explained softly. Ha! Ning Chen laughed softly. If Fan Lingyue didn't know martial arts, then there wouldn't be any martial arts in the world. That palm strike almost killed him. However, he couldn't tell little Mingyue these things. Why don't you tell me a story? Ning Chen suggested. I don't know. The little girl said with difficulty. Then I'll tell you a joke. Ning Chen smiled strangely. Okay. Mingyue nodded. Once upon a time, there was a eunuch. Ning Chen opened his mouth and said nothing else. What happened next? Mingyue asked curiously. Nothing else. Ning Chen replied. Mingyue was stunned. After a long time, she finally reacted. She hit the former hard with her little hand and said with a red face, "You're a bad guy." "Ha ha, I'm just joking." Ning Chen laughed and continued, "Why don't I tell you a new story?" "No, I want to hear a story." Mingyue pouted. "What kind of story?" Ning Chen asked. Little Mingyue thought for a while and said, "Why don't you tell me about yourself?" She knew that there weren't many people in this world who could make Sister Lingyue pay attention to them. Since the bad guy was so powerful, he must have a lot of stories to tell. Ning Chen didn't refuse. Wasn't it just telling stories about heroes? He was the best at it. Once upon a time, there was a young, handsome, confident, kind and cute boy who entered the palace. The story was very long, mainly because a certain someone had shamelessly added too many exaggerated adjectives, resulting in a story that could be written on a palm-sized piece of paper, taking more than 2 hours to reach the part where he fell off the cliff. You don't know how big that strange bird was when I fell down. Its wings were as wide as 4 to 5 feet. Ning Chen was in the midst of telling the story vividly but was interrupted by little Mingyue without giving him any face. "You're lying. How can there be such a big bird? The other plots may be slightly exaggerated, but I didn't exaggerate at all about this." "That's..." Ning Chen was about to explain when he suddenly heard a deep roar coming from the sky. His calm face instantly darkened. This time, there was no need to explain. Chapter 98. Above the horizon, a huge black shadow appeared. It covered the sky and blocked all the light. It was much wider than what Ning Chen had described. Little Mingyu was nervous. She hugged Ning Chen's neck tightly. No matter how determined a little girl was, she was still afraid of this unknown monster. Chirp! The strange bird let out a long cry and swooped down towards the two people below. Ning Chen's eyes turned cold. He stamped his foot and turned into a silver light. With a swoosh, he slashed at the bird's abdomen. Crash! Blood sprayed out. A long wound appeared on the bird's body. However, the bird was too big. It was more than 30 meters wide. After a painful cry, it quickly left. Ning Chen landed and found that the bird had disappeared. He couldn't help but frown. What was that thing? His sword couldn't cut it open. Its body was much harder than expected. There were too many unknowns in a primitive place like the Chizhou Mountains. It seemed that he had to be more careful. Roar! Suddenly, the beast's roar shook the sky. Hundreds of birds flew away in fright. The earth shook violently as if there was an earthquake. Little Mingyu hugged Ning Chen even tighter. The nervousness on her face became more intense. Ning Chen walked forward quietly. The ink sword in his hand was still dripping with blood. He knew that tonight wouldn't be easy. No wonder no one entered the Chizhou Mountains. Even martial artists didn't want to try. Just the strange bird just now was enough to make martial artists below the 7th rank unable to deal with it. In the past, he met one when he fell off the cliff. Today, he met another one. It seemed that this thing wasn't as rare as he thought. There were monsters every year, but there were especially many today. Boom! At this moment, the world suddenly shook. A huge fist fell from the sky. It was as heavy as a small mountain. It was so heavy that it made people breathless. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. He took half a step back. His left hand was covered in a dark yellow light. True qi flowed through his body. He gathered all his strength into one punch. With a rumbling sound, the aftermath spread out. The ancient trees around couldn't bear such a huge force. They broke apart and flew everywhere. The owner of the giant fist revealed himself. It was actually a beast ape that was about 30 meters tall. Its entire body was covered in dense brown hair. It had an ugly appearance and looked very frightening. Roar! The giant ape roared at the sky, and the terrifying sound waves turned into a gale, blowing up the fallen leaves. A mere beast dares to be so arrogant? Kneel! Ning Chen coldly snorted. His left hand opened into a palm and grabbed the giant ape's fist. The thick earth energy erupted and he suddenly pulled it downwards. However, with a thud, the giant ape lost its balance and fell to the ground with a loud crash. For a moment, the heaven and earth shook. The ink sword moved, condensing into frost. Just as it was about to end this beast's life, it was stopped by little Mingyu. "Don't kill it," said Mingyu. Ning Chen frowned. When did little Mingyu become so soft-hearted? As an emperor, how could he be so soft-hearted? We were the ones who trespassed into its territory. It was only protecting its home, Mingyu explained softly. Fear also appeared on the giant ape's ugly face. It lowered its head to show its submission. Ning Chen was unwilling to go against little Mingyu's wishes. He withdrew his ink sword and coldly said, "Get up." Hearing this, the giant ape actually stood up, as if it could understand human language. Ning Chen looked at the path that was blocked by the big guy and frowned again. "Move aside, don't block the way." The giant ape carefully moved aside, afraid that it would make the terrifying human in front of it unhappy again. "I'll get down and walk on my own," said Mingyu softly. "Okay," replied Ning Chen. He then squatted down and put the little girl down. Mingyu held the big hand in front of her and smiled at the big guy beside her. Then, she walked forward with small steps. Ning Chen followed and thoughtfully glanced at the giant ape. This big guy should have seen humans before and even interacted with them for a long time. Otherwise, it shouldn't be able to understand human language. No matter how smart a creature was, it was impossible to be born with the ability to understand human language. Even humans couldn't do it, let alone a beast ape. It seemed that there were still people who had set foot in this place. However, he didn't know who was so bold and bored to actually teach a monster to understand human language. Thinking of this, Ning Chen stopped and turned around to look at the giant ape. He shouted, "Hey, big guy, have you seen humans before?" "Woo!" The giant ape nodded its head in response. "Can you bring us to take a look?" asked Ning Chen. "Woo!" The giant ape nodded again in response. Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand and with a stomp of his feet, he turned into a stream of light and landed on the big guy's shoulder. Then, he said, "Let's go." Roar! The giant ape roared towards the sky, scaring the little girl. "Don't shout!" Mingyu shouted in dissatisfaction. The giant ape immediately shut its mouth and silently took large strides forward. The trees in the primitive land were too tall. The giant ape was already 10 feet tall, but it still didn't stand out among them. It was like a child next to an adult. The giant ape's skin was rough and thick. It didn't matter if the branches and vines hit it, but little Mingyu couldn't. Therefore, the one who had the hardest time was Ning Chen. He used his true qi to protect the little girl, afraid that she would get hurt. Boom boom boom. Fortunately, not long after, they heard the deafening sound of a waterfall. The giant ape brought the two of them through the last part of the forest and stopped in front of the ancient pond. In front of his eyes, it suddenly opened up. On the precipice that was 1,000 feet high, one could only see the water rushing downwards. The water splashed, rolling faster and faster, rolling more and more fiercely. At the top, it was like a layer of smooth water, but at the bottom, it was like a snow-white jade belt. As it rushed downwards, it suddenly turned into an iceberg, a toppling snowy peak, collapsing downwards, directly rushing down towards the ancient pool below. The crashing sound of the waterfall was like 10,000 horses galloping, majestic and shocking to the extreme. There's actually such a treasure land in this mountain range. Ning Chen was shocked. He felt the two cyclones in his chi si begin to stir, indicating that the spiritual energy here was much denser than the outside world. So beautiful. The little girl always had no resistance to beautiful things. Looking at the majestic waterfall in front of her, she was slightly dazed. Ning Chen brought the little girl down from the giant ape's shoulder and walked to the ancient pond. He touched the water. It was slightly cold, but not bone-piercing. You play here. I'll look around, said Ning Chen. Okay. Mingyue really liked this place and softly agreed. Ning Chen raised his head and glanced at the giant ape. He indifferently warned, "Big guy, look after little Mingyue. If anything happens to her, I'll come back and tear you apart." Woo! The giant ape fearfully nodded in response. Only then did Ning Chen relax and walk to the side. He wanted to see just what kind of person was able to awaken a monster's intelligence. If someone had lived here before, there should be some signs left behind. After all, humans and monsters were different. After searching for a while, Ning Chen finally found a stone house 300 meters away from the waterfall. The surroundings were already covered in weeds. If you didn't look carefully, you would think it was just a large rock. The door of the stone house had already been corroded by the passage of time. It looked like it had at least several hundred years of history. There wasn't much inside the house. There was only a stone bed and a stone table. There wasn't even a stool. It should have been turned to dust by the merciless passage of time. Ning Chen stepped forward and found a piece of paper on the stone table. It was an ordinary piece of paper, but it appeared so unusual in this place. Even wood couldn't withstand the erosion of time and turn to dust, but an ordinary piece of paper could be preserved in good condition. There were a few words written on the paper. They were very clear and not difficult to understand. Encountered a little beast ape. Mother passed away. My heart was compassionate. I protected you for 10 years and left, Ji Taisher. There were only a few words written on the paper. There was no other words. The content didn't seem to be anything special. But the name signed at the end shocked Ning Chen greatly. Ji Taisher, 3 simple words, but they were more important than Mount Tai. The first imperial tutor of Xia, the head of the 3 ministers, the founder of Confucianism 1,000 years ago. He was also known as the Master. The rule that the 3 ministers were not allowed to interfere in politics was also set by the Master. The 1,000 years of Xia were inseparable from the contributions of Confucianism. Although Confucianism was gradually corrupted by power, it was undeniable that without Confucianism, Xia wouldn't have been invincible for 1,000 years. It could be said that these 1,000 years were Confucianism's 1,000 years. Even the brilliance of Eternal Night sect was somewhat suppressed by Confucianism. Eternal Night sect believed in God, while Confucianism believed in human. The two were in fierce conflict and couldn't tolerate each other. In today's world, the only orthodoxy that could be compared to Eternal Night sect was Confucianism. This was also the reason why Xia could prosper for so long. 1,000 years ago, God's ideology was so powerful. To be able to establish Confucianism under such conditions, one could see how amazing the Master was at that time. The Master opened the spiritual wisdom of the people of Xia. They no longer blindly believed in God, and this made the world more rational and less ignorant. Ever since then, in Great Xia, teachers could no longer use the word teacher casually. Those who could be called teacher were all university quizzes. Ning Chen knew all this clearly, so he wasn't shocked by this. What shocked him was that he had seen the handwriting on the paper before. He had stayed in the academy for 2 months. There was also a master in the academy, who looked very old. The master was very old, so old that he almost couldn't write anymore. In the entire academy, he was probably the only one who had seen the master write. At that time, his legs had just been crippled and he couldn't adapt to anything. His whole body slowed down. He learned slowly and walked slowly. Fortunately, he met the master who was also very slow. Therefore, other than chopping firewood, he liked to listen to the master's classes the most. On the night before he left the academy, he talked to the master for an entire night. They talked about many things, including many secrets that had been buried in his heart for a long time. He even told the master that he wasn't from this world. The master didn't say anything. He only wrote 4 words, "Go with the flow." It was written in the snow and disappeared with the wind. He didn't notice it at that time. It wasn't until today when he saw the words on the paper that he remembered. This matter was too shocking and too unbelievable. The master from 1,000 years ago was still alive. Chapter 99. The headmaster was in the academy. Ning Chen was so shocked that he was speechless. 1,000 years had passed. Was the headmaster still alive? But he had never heard of anyone who could live for more than 1,000 years, not even an innate expert. He did not know how long an innate expert could live in this world. 300 years, 400 years, or 500 years. But it was definitely not 1,000 years. Moreover, the headmaster did not have the aura of a warrior. No matter when, there was no sign that the headmaster had practiced martial arts. Not 1,000 years ago, not 1,000 years later. On the other hand, the headmaster was really old. He was so old that he was like an ordinary old man with 1 foot in the grave. The feeling of having 1 foot in the grave could not be deceived. He even felt that the headmaster could not live for more than 10 years. He could not understand. If the headmaster of the academy was really the headmaster, then how did he survive the past 1,000 years? He could see that the headmaster was struggling. He was like an ordinary old man who was fighting against time and refused to leave. Why was the headmaster holding on so bitterly? Ning Chen could not figure it out. He tried to pick up the paper on the table to see what was going on. However, as soon as his hand touched it, the paper quickly turned to ash. Although the headmaster's brush and ink helped the paper resist the erosion of time, it had reached its limit. After all, the human body was contaminated with too much of the aura of the mortal world. The paper, which had been close to the boundary point, could not bear it anymore. Ning Chen sighed in his heart and turned to leave. It seemed that he had to go back to the academy and ask the headmaster himself when he had time. Chirp, chirp, suddenly, a series of shocking cries sounded in the sky. Ning Chen's expression changed instantly. His figure flashed and he rushed to where little Mingyu was. He covered a distance of 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. He saw the giant ape grab a huge stone and throw it into the sky. In the dark sky, the huge stone hit one of the strange birds. It screamed miserably and a lot of feathers fell. However, there were too many strange birds and they were too strong. It was not a problem that the giant ape could solve with 1 or 2 stones. Okay, you protect little Mingyu. Leave the rest to me. Ning Chen looked up at the dark sky and narrowed his eyes slightly. Wu, the giant ape, responded with a trace of fear. Useless. The headmaster taught you for 10 years in vain. As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen stomped his foot and turned into a silver light that shot into the sky. In the next moment, the sword light tore through the sky, drawing a black brilliance in the 9 heavens. Then, Blood sprayed out and a large amount of blood sprinkled down. Warriors below the Xiantian realm couldn't stay in the air for a long time. As Ning Chen landed, he stepped on the body of a strange bird. Then, he rose up again and flew towards the highest flying strange bird in the sky. This was the strange bird that he had slashed earlier. Its feathers were still stained with blood, but its wounds were gradually healing at an astonishing speed. Chirp! The leader of the strange birds in the sky screamed. The 4 strange birds circling around it immediately swooped down and crashed into the humans in the sky. A flying feather, a sword of heaven and earth. In the dazzling silver light, Ning Chen turned into a huge silver sword and pierced through the bodies of the 2 strange birds. The black sword condensed into frost and cut through the sky, illuminating the entire sky. Whoosh! There was a terrifying cry as one of the strange bird leader's wings was chopped off by the black sword. Blood sprayed out like rain. The leader of the strange birds could no longer support itself with a broken wing. It screamed miserably and then quickly fell down. The rest of the strange birds panicked and flew towards their leader in large groups. In a panic, they used their bodies to support the latter and hurriedly escaped. However, at this moment, Ning Chen's sword arrived again. He stepped on the body of the strange bird leader and cut open the other wing. Fresh blood splattered all over the strange birds below. Their screams became more and more panicked. They flapped their huge wings with all their might, desperately trying to escape. Ning Chen's cold eyes showed no mercy. The dark yellow light around his body flickered and the chi of thick earth exploded. With a heavy kick, he kicked the leader of the strange birds down. The strange birds below couldn't bear the sudden weight. They screamed in fear and helplessness as they watched their leader fall and crash onto the ground. It's your turn. Ning Chen snorted coldly and used the momentum to land on the body of a strange bird. His sword pierced through the bird's body and directly stabbed into its back. In the next moment, the black sword slashed across the strange bird's body and directly cut it in half. Seeing this miserable situation, the rest of the strange birds couldn't bear the fear in their hearts and frantically fled. They were afraid that if they were a little slower, they would end up being cut into pieces. Ning Chen landed from the sky and didn't chase after them. This warning was enough. He couldn't kill all the strange birds, and there was no need to. Of the 2 strange birds, one was dead and one was injured. The injured one was breathing out more than it was breathing in. Its wings were chopped off and it fell from such a high altitude. It was already dead. Beside the ancient pond, little Mingyu was well protected by the giant ape. Not a single drop of blood was stained on her. This made Ning Chen very satisfied. Woo! Seeing the terrifying human walking over, the giant ape didn't just express its submission. There was also a trace of struggle in its eyes. The giant ape was too tall, so Ning Chen didn't notice it. He took little Mingyu and was about to leave. Woo! The wild desire finally won over the fear. The giant ape nervously stopped the 2 and glanced at the strange birds in the distance with a pleading expression. Ning Chen stopped and frowned. He didn't understand what was going on. Little Mingyu seemed to understand a little. She pulled the former's sleeve and pointed at the strange bird. It seems like it wants something from the big strange bird. Woo woo. The giant ape nodded. Ning Chen thought for a moment and walked forward with little Mingyu. He raised his head and asked, "Where is it?" The giant ape pointed at the strange bird's head. The nervousness on its face became even more intense. "Mingyu, step back," Ning Chen said softly. "Okay." Mingyu obediently took a few steps back. Ning Chen reached out and touched the strange bird's head. He sent his true qi into it. A moment later, his eyes narrowed. It could actually sense spiritual qi. Swish! He unsheathed his ink sword and cut open the strange bird's head. As blood sprayed out, a walnut-sized green bead flew out. Ning Chen went forward and grabbed it. He looked at it carefully but couldn't find anything. He then casually tossed it to the big guy. Take it. Woo woo. The giant ape's nervous expression instantly turned into joy. It took the bead and ate it without saying anything. What is that? Little Mingyu was disgusted and asked with a strange expression. I also don't know. Ning Chen shook his head. He couldn't see anything special about it. It was like a condensation of spiritual qi. He had never heard of such a thing. The probability of it appearing should be very small. No wonder this strange bird's body was so sturdy. It was obviously about to become a spirit. Roar! At this moment, the giant ape suddenly looked up and roared. Its entire body emitted a green light, and then it quickly shrank. 30 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, the light became brighter and brighter. The giant ape also shrank until it was about the same height as little Mingyu. Then, it gradually stopped. After shrinking, the giant ape didn't look so ugly and funny anymore. Instead, it looked much cuter. Little Mingyu's eyes bloomed with joy. She reached out and patted the giant ape's head. She was very surprised. Ning Chen couldn't figure it out, but he didn't think too much about it. The teacher could live for 1,000 years. What was so strange about this? Let's go. Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand. After such a long delay, they still had to hurry on. Mingyu reluctantly looked at the giant ape and followed with small steps. Woo woo. The giant ape grabbed the corner of the little girl's clothes and followed them. Ning Chen stopped and frowned again. He asked, You want to go with us? Woo. The giant ape nodded, looking uneasy. Ning Chen looked at little Mingyu and sighed in his heart. Wasn't it just raising a monkey? As long as little Mingyu was happy. Follow if you want. After saying that, Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand and continued walking. The giant ape was delighted and followed them. Mingyu was in a good mood. She said sweetly, Let's give it a name. Xiao Huang. Ning Chen said casually. Mingyu pursed her lips. She was a little dissatisfied, but she still accepted the name. Xiao Huang it was. It was a little unpleasant to hear, but it was easy to remember. After the two people and the ape left, the stone house outside the waterfall finally couldn't withstand the continuous shaking and collapsed. It completely buried the traces of the teacher's life. The cold night was still a little cold. The bright moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling the cold water on the ground. After going around the big waterfall, there was an endless mountain range. The Chizhou mountain range was very big. If they wanted to cross it, they would have to cross at least 2 mountains. They were not even halfway there. There was less than 2 hours before dawn. After walking for a while, little Mingyu became sleepy and fell asleep on Ning Chen's back. Ning Chen didn't stop and continued walking. The little ape followed behind him. They walked lightly, not daring to disturb the little girl who was sleeping soundly. The second mountain range was much bigger than the first. The moment Ning Chen set foot on it, he felt a little uneasy. A martial artist's perception was much more sensitive than ordinary people. This feeling was as if he was being watched by something terrifying. He was at the peak of the 8th rank. Something that could make him feel uneasy was at least equivalent to the 8th rank of a human, or even higher. The little ape also became restless. It looked left and right but couldn't find anything. Ning Chen walked forward silently. He became more and more alert. With little Mingyu beside him, he didn't dare to be careless. In the sea of qi in his dantian, the silver cyclone and the dark yellow cyclone rotated at the same time. Traces of vital essence flowed out and formed an invisible net around 3 steps, guarding against any accidents. The little ape's restlessness calmed down a little. It followed behind, still looking left and right carefully. After walking for more than an hour, the bright moon hanging high in the sky gradually set. The first ray of dawn was just about to arrive. The moment when night and day alternated, the world around them changed instantly. a big crack suddenly opened in the shaking world. It was like the mouth of a giant beast, swallowing the two people and the ape above. The next moment, the crack closed with a bang. The world returned to normal. The cold wind blew and the fallen leaves danced. In the blink of an eye, all traces were covered. It was as if nothing had happened. Chapter 100. The wind whistled past his ears and his body fell faster and faster. At this critical moment, Ning Chen pulled out his black sword and stabbed it into the stone wall in front of him, stopping his fall. The little ape hugged the former's leg and barely managed to stop its body. Ning Chen looked down and saw that it was so dark that he couldn't see the end of it. The path above was sealed and the bottom was so deep that he couldn't see the end. It was really difficult to go up and down. Little Mingyu was also awakened by this sudden movement. Looking at the darkness around her, she subconsciously hugged the only thing she could rely on. "I'm here. It'll be fine." Ning Chen comforted her gently. "Okay." Mingyu hugged him even tighter. "Hold on tight. We're going down." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen pulled out the sword that was stuck in the stone wall, and his body fell down again. Just like this, Ning Chen would use his black sword to slow down his fall every few dozen feet. Little Mingyu was protected by his true qi and was safe. After a long time, the two finally reached the ground. The little ape also obediently stayed on the side and watched. It didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Ning Chen took out a match and blew on it. He saw a path in front of him with the light. This was the only path. Ning Chen walked forward. After walking for a while, he gradually saw a light far away. It was very clear, but it wasn't the light of the sun. It was the unique spiritual light of a martial artist. He was also a martial artist, so he wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of light. However, this kind of invisible pressure faintly suppressed any powerhouse he had ever seen. Ning Chen was very shocked. How could there be such a powerhouse in this kind of place? There was no doubt that this person was at least one of the 5 strongest Xiantian powerhouses in the world. He might even surpass them. The spiritual light coming from the distance was very peaceful. It didn't have the slightest bit of evil. It was like a calm ocean, boundless and containing all things. Ning Chen continued to walk forward. He wanted to see exactly who this person was. If a powerhouse of this level had evil intentions, they wouldn't even have a chance to escape. It didn't matter if it was far or near. After 100 steps, the space suddenly changed. Everything around Ning Chen changed. Even Mingyu and the little ape disappeared. In front of him, a purple guqin was playing by itself. The formless sound of the great Tao spread out in circles, silently cleansing the souls of those who entered. An illusion. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes as he looked at the zither in front of him. The same situation had happened to him in the Great Hall of the Netherworld. It was very strange, and people couldn't tell if it was real or fake. In the end, the little white horse swallowed something to save him. In the state of consciousness, everything you see is real. Just at this moment, a violet-robed youth slowly walked out and sat by the zither, gently stroking its strings. Ning Chen was startled. Was this that powerful cultivator? At such a close distance, he didn't feel that formless pressure. "Senior, may I ask where this place is?" Ning Chen stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "In the belly of a Taotai." The purple-clothed young man stopped playing the zither and raised his head to answer calmly. "Taotai," Ning Chen frowned. Wasn't this a mythical monster? It actually existed. Legend has it that the Taotai was one of the sons of the dragon. It was extremely greedy and gluttonous and could devour everything in the world. It was a monster that had only appeared in ancient myths and legends. "Can you let me see the heavenly book in your body?" At this moment, the purple-clothed young man spoke. Ning Chen's body trembled. How could this person know that he had a heavenly book? The purple-clothed young man smiled faintly and said, no need to be surprised. 1,000 years ago, I also had a heavenly book, so I'm more sensitive to its aura. Hearing this, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. 1,000 years ago again? Didn't that mean that this person had also lived for 1,000 years? May I ask for Senior's name? Ning Chen bowed respectfully again and asked. Jiang Wangji. The purple-clothed young man thought for a moment and softly replied. It had been too long since anyone had asked for his name, so he had forgotten it. Dao Kuei. Ning Chen's heart trembled. The person in front of him was the head of the Dao sect from 1,000 years ago. The Dao sect had existed for much longer than the Confucian sect. It could even be compared to the Eternal Night sect. However, it had been destroyed 1,000 years ago, and its orthodoxy had ended. Once, the Book of Moon in the Heavenly Book belonged to the Dao sect. After the Dao sect was destroyed, the Book of Moon also disappeared. It only reappeared 100 years ago and was obtained by the Eternal Night sect. It would be a lie to say that he was not shocked to meet such an old antique here. However, with the cultivation of the person in front of him, there was really no need for him to lie. Ning Chen no longer had any doubts. He activated his internal energy, and the cyclone in his dantian rotated. 2 broken pages of the heavenly book slowly flew out and floated in front of him. Book of Life, Book of Earth. Jiang Wangji's knowledge was extraordinary. He could tell the origin of the heavenly book at a glance. He was not too surprised. Everyone had their own opportunities. Obtaining 2 heavenly books could only mean that the young man in front of him was luckier than the average person. Ning Chen took back the 2 heavenly books. He finally knew the name of the other heavenly book. Book of Earth? It was much more impressive than the Book of Dust. Is the headmaster still alive? Jiang Wangji suddenly asked. Ning Chen's expression froze, and then he felt relieved. Dao Kuei and the headmaster were from the same era. It was not strange that they knew each other. He should be alive, but I am still not sure, Ning Chen answered honestly. Jiang Wangji thought for a while and said, he should be in a place called Tiansang Academy. 1,000 years ago, he told me that he was going to build such an academy. At this moment, Ning Chen was finally 100% sure that the old headmaster in the academy was the headmaster from 1,000 years ago. If so, the headmaster is still alive. However, I have a feeling that the headmaster may not be able to hold on for more than 10 years, Ning Chen said seriously. Sigh. Jiang Wangji sighed softly. Even someone as amazing as the headmaster could not withstand the merciless passage of time. 1,000 years is too long. Ning Chen hesitated for a moment. He could no longer suppress the doubts in his heart and asked, Senior, can a human really live for more than 1,000 years? Impossible. Jiang Wangji shook his head. Then he looked at the space around him and continued, do you know why I am voluntarily trapped in this place? Senior, please tell me, Ning Chen said respectfully. Because in the stomach of the Taotai, the flow of time is slower than outside. I am not as good as the headmaster, so I can only use this method to survive this long 1,000 years. As for the headmaster's method, you will not understand it, and you don't need to understand it. However, any method of immortality has a price. No one is an exception. Jiang Wangji's voice was filled with endless exhaustion. Even though he was in the stomach of the Taotai, he could not hold on any longer. 1,000 years had already exhausted him. Ning Chen's eyes were filled with shock and confusion. Senior and the headmaster did not seem like people who were afraid of death. Why did they have to hold on so bitterly and live through this 1,000 years that was worse than death? I know you have doubts, but I can't say it now. Otherwise, it will cause unnecessary changes. The headmaster and I can't hold on for much longer. There can't be any more accidents. As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Wangji got up and walked to the front of the young man in front of him. He stretched out his right hand and gently touched the young man's forehead. Immediately, a Haotian Taoism cultivation method was reflected in his mind. I know that the life scroll only has mental cultivation methods and no moves. The moves recorded in this cultivation method are the most suitable Haotian Taoism secret method besides the original forbidden move in the life scroll. I don't have many requests. I just hope that you can live well, live at all costs. Then, try your best to find the nothing scroll. Remember, don't tell anyone that the headmaster and I are alive. As for the way out, just go back the way you came. In a while, I will disturb the Taotia's senses again and make it think that it is time to eat. When it opens its mouth, you rush out immediately. I will also help you. As he spoke, the surrounding space suddenly shattered. The purple figure also turned into stars and disappeared between heaven and earth. Ning Chen came to his senses and found that little Mingyu had been guarding him worriedly. Her little hands were tightly grasped, for fear that he would disappear if she could not hold him. Time was of the essence. Ning Chen did not have time to say more. He held little Mingyu in his arms and rushed back the way they came. The little ape beast roared and quickly followed after him. The next moment, the spiritual light of the martial artist behind him became brighter, like a purple sun. Ning Chen knew that this was the senior interfering with the Taotia's senses. Rumble. Suddenly, the earth shook. In the sky ahead, a huge mouth opened. A bright light shone down. It was extremely bright. It was the first light of dawn. Let's go. Ning Chen's aura exploded. He rolled up the little ape and turned into a stream of light that soared into the sky. At the same time, a vast power appeared out of thin air. A soft palm rushed over and helped him escape from the Taotia's stomach. After Ning Chen left, the huge gully quickly closed. In the deepest part of the Taotia's stomach, Jiang Wangji looked at the slowly disappearing sunlight in the distance and sighed softly. He had not seen this kind of warm light for a long time. He was a person from 1,000 years ago. He could no longer see the light. His existence was no longer tolerated by heaven and earth. Once he went out, he would soon disappear. He had waited for 1,000 years, hoping that he could catch up. This young man was not bad. Not everyone could listen to the soul-leaving song of Haotian Taoism. He was fine, which meant that his nature was not bad. He was not greedy and not arrogant. He was a trustworthy person. For 1,000 years, those who were swallowed by the Tao Tai had basically died. Even if they did not die, in the end, no one could pass the test of the soul-leaving song. Human greed was essentially no different from the Tao Tai. He had no time to wait. Fortunately, he had found one at the last moment. The no scroll was too important. He had to find it as soon as possible. Otherwise, this disaster would become a real catastrophe. Only those who had the tomes of arcane would have a special reaction to the tomes of arcane. The no scroll represented nothingness and destruction. It was the key to facing the disaster in the future. He and the headmaster were too old to stop this disaster. He only hoped that these young people 1,000 years later could shoulder this burden. The headmaster's divination skill was unparalleled. He believed that the headmaster said that there would be hope in the human world. Chapter 101. Under the first light of dawn, a silver light rushed out from the ground. After landing, it continued to run for more than 10 miles before stopping. The morning sun was a little dazzling. Little Mingyu took a while to adjust to it before opening her eyes. She looked around and saw that she was back on the ground. She couldn't help but smile. The little ape stayed aside with lingering fear. Its big round eyes looked sneaky, afraid that it would fall into that dark and strange place again. Ning Chen didn't explain anything. In fact, he was a little confused. If it wasn't for the Taoist secret method in his mind, he would have suspected that this was another illusion. Dao Kuei, Jiang Wangji, who had disappeared 1,000 years ago, actually lived to this era. What was he waiting for? He didn't hesitate to pay such a big price to survive 1,000 years. Was it worth it? Go by yourself. Ning Chen put little Mingyu down and held her little hand as he spoke softly. Okay, Mingyu said obediently. Not long after, Ning Chen heard the sound of the river, so he took little Mingyu there to rest for a while. After a tiring night, he was fine, but little Mingyu couldn't fall asleep several times. She probably couldn't take it anymore. The river was turbulent and very clear. There was no human habitation in the primitive land, so the river water was very clean. Ning Chen caught a fish, roasted it, and handed it to little Mingyu. The little girl ate one, and then fell asleep in the former's arms after eating it. The little ape stayed aside and didn't eat anything. Since it swallowed the bead of the strange bird, its appetite for food had been greatly reduced. After little Mingyu fell asleep, Ning Chen calmed down and carefully sorted out the Taoist secret method in his mind. Taoism had existed for more than 10,000 years, and its methods had been perfected by generations of sages. It could be said that the methods of Taoism were the closest to the tomes of arcane in the world. Dao Kuei was the strongest person 1,000 years ago. It could be said that he single-handedly supported Taoism. After Dao Kuei disappeared, Taoism was quickly destroyed. Taoism was destroyed, and Confucianism was flourishing. Jiang Wangji and the headmaster did the best to resist the eternal night cult. The secret method that Dao Kuei passed on to him didn't require the primordial realm like the scroll of earth, but it still required him to be at least at the peak of the 9th rank. He couldn't practice it now. This was the wisdom of Taoism over the past 10,000 years. He needed to be patient. Moreover, he hadn't fully grasped the things that the old Marquis had taught him. He still understood the principle of biting off more than he could chew. Little Mingyu was exhausted. She slept all the way until noon. The little ape picked a lot of wild fruits. After a simple meal, the two of them continued their journey. For the rest of the journey, they did not encounter any danger. Ning Chen sped up again and finally walked out of the Chizhou mountain range when the cold moon hung high in the sky. From this moment on, they had finally stepped into the heart of the Central Plains and were not far from Fan Lingyue's army. Ning Chen's mood also started to become heavy. In this world, the person he was most unwilling to face was Fan Lingyue. This woman was too intelligent, too ruthless, and almost had no weaknesses. He didn't know if little Mingyu could become Fan Lingyue's weakness, but he still had to try. Although it was despicable, this was war. There was no reason to speak of. Since the beginning of this war, Emperor Xia had already gone insane. In order to completely draw out the internal problems, he had actually let the wolf into the house and watched as Yengue's city was broken. It was hard to believe that such a stupid thing would happen to an emperor. He had heard before that time could turn a wise emperor into a fatuous one and a tyrant. When one grew old, the desire for power would become even stronger and the suspicion in one's heart would also become heavier. It wasn't that there were no examples in the history of Huaxia, but no one was as extreme as Emperor Xia. At that time, he really hoped that Emperor Xia had died on that mountain, even if Great Xia would be in chaos for a while. If Emperor Xia died, Great Xia would be in chaos. If he didn't die, Great Xia would be even more chaotic. The current situation of Great Xia was much worse than before. If it wasn't for Zhang Sun, he really didn't want to get involved in this mess. Whoever ruled the world had nothing to do with him. In terms of closeness, little Mingyu was much more suitable than Emperor Xia, who had always wanted to kill him. Fan Lingyue's army of 300,000 shouldn't have advanced too far. With such a big thing happening in the northern Meng imperial court, it was impossible to hide it. The hearts of the northern Meng army was the first thing that had to be resolved. After all, Great Xia had been invincible for 1,000 years. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The cities in the Central Plains were connected one after another. It wasn't that easy to attack the imperial city. The cruelest war had just begun. Once Fan Lingyue swept away all the troubles and went all out south, Great Xia would be in real danger. Whether or not they could stop Fan Lingyue before he reached the imperial city was the key to Great Xia's survival. In any dynasty, once the imperial city was breached, it wouldn't be far from destruction. This was the spiritual sustenance of the people of the dynasty. It didn't just represent a simple city. He kidnapped little Mingyu and only temporarily delayed the northern Meng army's advance to the south, giving Great Xia a chance to breathe. As for threatening Fan Lingyue to retreat, even he himself didn't believe it. The reason was simple. She was the military advisor. She was even more ruthless than Emperor Xia. The only difference was that Emperor Xia's ruthlessness had buried the north of Great Xia, while Fan Lingyue had mercilessly taken down the north of Great Xia. In this world, the difference between a smart person and a stupid person was much greater than one could imagine. Now, he had already confirmed that the academy's teacher was the same teacher from 1,000 years ago. Therefore, the first thing he had to do was to return to the academy. In this world, if there was anyone whose intelligence could match Fan Lingyue, it would be his teacher. The road back to the academy was very long. Ning Chen brought little Mingyu and rushed for 2 days before they arrived. The first person he went to see wasn't his teacher, but Mr. Lu. He brought along a jar of wine that he had bought on the street. There was a imperial word on it. Old man Lu was so angry that he was fuming. This brat had said before he left that he would bring back imperial wine for him. This time, he actually brought back imperial wine. He was grateful to his whole family. Ning Chen didn't feel any shame. Emperor Xia was chasing him all over the world. Where could he get the real imperial wine for old man Lu? Take it or leave it. If you don't want it, I'll drink it myself, Ning Chen said impatiently. Of course I want it. Why wouldn't I? I can't let a little bastard like you benefit from it. Old man Lu snatched the jar of wine and casually threw it to the side. It was his business whether he drank it or not, but he definitely had to leave the wine behind. This is the little emperor of Northern Meng? Old man Lu glanced at the delicate little boy beside Ning Chen and asked curiously. Yes. Ning Chen patted little Mingyu's little hat and said, "Call me Mr. Lu." Mr. Lu. Mingyu obediently called out. Old man Lu nodded and said with a strange expression, "Looks like you two get along well." Of course, I've always been very popular. Ning Chen laughed. Alright, the wine is here. I have to go. Next time, I might bring you the real imperial wine. After saying this, Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand and walked out of the courtyard. He had come here to tell old man Lu that he was safe. When his legs had just been crippled, this old man had treated him well. He couldn't be ungrateful. Old man Lu looked at Ning Chen's back and shook his head helplessly. This kid was really not easy to deal with. After seeing Mr. Lu, Ning Chen returned to his old residence in the academy. The little white horse had grown fat and had also grown up. When the two met, there was no awkward silence, nor were there tears in their eyes. The little white horse wanted to express its longing, but was pushed away by Ning Chen. He hated horses that didn't care about hygiene the most. Little Mingyu had fallen asleep in the house. After rushing for a few days, the little girl was a little tired. After arriving at the academy, her spirit wasn't too good. Xiao Huang, you stay here with little White. Don't fight. Do whatever you want. Ning Chen also left the little ape behind. Why was there always a monkey beside him? The little ape didn't dare to object and could only smile at the little white horse to show its friendliness. The little white horse proudly turned its head away, showing its disdain. Ning Chen didn't care how they got along. If they had the ability, he would tear down the academy. The academy had an innate stage principle. No matter how arrogant a monster was, he would be able to slap it down. The headmaster's residence wasn't far from here. He used to walk slowly and had to walk for a long time. Now, he could get there in a short while. However, at the headmaster's residence, he saw a person he really didn't expect. The imperial preceptor of the Great Xia dynasty, the head of the Confucian sect, and the grand advisor. The Grand Advisor stood beside the headmaster with a respectful expression, following the rules of the Confucian sect and performing the etiquette of a disciple. When Ning Qin came in, neither of them were surprised, as if they already knew that he was coming. The headmaster was as old as usual, like an ordinary old man in his twilight years. There was nothing special about him. "Headmaster," Ning Qin bowed and said respectfully. The headmaster nodded and said, "How was the journey to the north?" "I gained a lot," Ning Qin stood up and replied. "Ask whatever you want," the headmaster said slowly as he tidied up the rice paper on the table. "Are you the headmaster?" Ning Qin asked seriously. "Yes," the headmaster nodded and said. Ning Qin was shocked. Although he was already prepared, when he heard the headmaster admit it, he still felt that it was unbelievable. "How many people in the world know about this?" Ning Qin asked. "4," the headmaster said calmly. Ning Qin thought for a while. There were 3 people present. The other person, if he guessed correctly, should be the dean of the academy. "Will the great Xia dynasty be destroyed?" Ning Qin asked another question. "Yes," the headmaster nodded. Ning Qin's body suddenly trembled. This was the result. But if the headmaster said that the great Xia dynasty would be destroyed, then the great Xia dynasty would definitely be destroyed. The people of the Confucian sect cultivated the great righteousness and were good at seeking luck and avoiding misfortune. Although the headmaster didn't practice martial arts, he was the best in the art of divination. The reason was simple. The entire Confucian sect was founded by the headmaster, and the art of divination was no exception. "Is there a way to avoid it?" Ning Qin asked unwillingly. "Try your best," the headmaster said. "How?" Ning Qin asked for advice. "Stop the war in the world." The headmaster only said 4 words. The meaning was obvious and there was no mystery. Ning Qin still didn't quite understand. He knew that the headmaster wouldn't say useless words. Was the destruction of the great Xia dynasty not in this war? Chapter 102. The headmaster did not explain further. He had said what he needed to say. The rest was up to the younger generation. What would happen in the future was up to these young people to decide. There was not much he could do. At this moment, the Grand Advisor, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said, "Ning Qin, can the young emperor of Northern Meng be handed over to the imperial court?" "Impossible." Ning Qin was stunned and immediately refused without hesitation. The Grand Advisor looked solemn and said righteously, "The young emperor of Northern Meng is of great importance. I hope you can consider it seriously. As long as you are willing to cooperate, it is not impossible for you to be made a marquis in the future. Say no more. There is nothing to discuss. The young emperor can only be in my hands. No one else can." Ning Qin refused again. His attitude was unquestionable. He did not trust anyone in the imperial court, especially Emperor Xia. He had promised little Mingyu that he would not hand her over to anyone else. He had to keep his word. After Mingyu came to Great Xia, he was the only one she could rely on. If he let go, how could a 7-year-old girl live? As long as he was not dead, there was no room for discussion. The Grand Advisor frowned and said patiently, "The young emperor will not be of any use in your hands. The imperial court will be the one to negotiate. You can't make a promise and can't decide anything." Ning Qin did not speak. The Grand Advisor was telling the truth. If they wanted to negotiate with Northern Meng, only the imperial court would be the most suitable. Seeing that the young man in front of him did not speak, the Grand Advisor continued, "Listen to me. Hand over the young emperor. Only in this way can Great Xia have more time to breathe. Since you are willing to risk your life to break into the palace of Northern Meng, you must not want to see Great Xia lose this war." Ning Qin did not want to refute. He looked calmly at the leader of the Confucian sect in front of him and asked, "Grand Advisor, I know you are the leader of the Confucian sect and you also know that the Confucian sect values morality the most. I want to ask, I have already promised the young emperor that I will not hand him over to anyone. Tell me, is Great Xia more important or the promise more important?" The Grand Advisor's expression froze. He could not answer. Reason told him that compared to a personal promise, the foundation of Great Xia was of course more important. But he was the leader of the Confucian sect. How could he persuade someone to go back on their word? The headmaster listened quietly at the side. His old face remained calm, without any ripples. After a long time, he finally made up his mind and said in a deep voice, "Follow me back to the palace to meet His Majesty. I will persuade His Majesty to confer you the title of nobility and represent the imperial court to negotiate with the northern Meng royal court." Ning Chen furrowed his brows. It sounded plausible, but in fact, it was impossible. He knew very well just how intense Emperor Xia's desire to kill him was. While Yi Futian's existence had always been a thorn in Emperor Xia's side, it might have only been because of the gunpowder incident in the beginning, but it was no longer so simple now. Yi Futian had escaped the pursuit of Emperor Xia time and time again, and Emperor Xia's anger had long since reached a boiling point. The majesty of an emperor had always been merciless and unreasonable. Ning Chen said seriously, "Great sage, do you really think this method will work? It is no secret that Emperor Xia wants to kill me. Who can guarantee that Emperor Xia will not have the intention to kill me after I return to the palace? Who can guarantee that eunuch Pei will not suddenly attack me? Although I am not afraid of death, I do not want to court death, especially when I have to face a temperamental emperor." The great sage did not deny it. What Ning Chen said was the truth. The current Emperor Xia had indeed become somewhat unrecognizable. "I cannot promise you anything, but I can promise you that if His Majesty wants to kill you, I will help you stop eunuch Pei." At this point, the great sage looked at Ning Chen and said with an incomparably solemn expression, "For the sake of the great Xia, I hope you can try it with me." Hearing this, Ning Chen furrowed his brows again. He was not surprised that the great sage said he could stop eunuch Pei. As the head of the Confucian sect, he had to have some trump cards. He was just a little hesitant about whether this trip was worth it. He really did not have a good impression of Emperor Xia, and he did not believe that this tyrant, who was getting more and more perverted with age, would spare him. However, the great sage's words did cause him to waver. In the end, he still did not want to see the great Xia destroyed. "I can return to the palace with you, but you must promise me that if something happens to me, you must protect the little emperor's life. Swear on the 1,000 years of reputation of the Confucian sect." Ning Chen thought for a moment, but still agreed to the great sage's suggestion. However, he also raised his own request. The great sage did not hesitate. He nodded and said, "Fine, I promise you. Since you have decided, then do it. If you have time, you can come back to the academy more often," the teacher said calmly. "Thank you for your guidance today, teacher. This junior will take his leave." Ning Chen bowed respectfully. "Teacher, this student will take his leave." The great sage took half a step back and bowed before leaving. After the two of them left, the teacher picked up his brush and slowly wrote a word on the paper. His hand trembled, but his strength penetrated the paper. When Ning Chen returned to his residence, little Ming Yu was still asleep, so he sat to the side and waited. The great sage was about to speak, but he closed his mouth. He did not want to make the youth in front of him unhappy at this time. The two of them waited for more than 4 hours before little Ming Yu slowly woke up. She sat up and smiled when she saw Ning Chen beside the bed. "You're awake. We should go," Ning Chen said gently as he adjusted the little girl's cloth hat. "Where are we going?" Ming Yu did not understand. "The Great Xia Imperial Palace," Ning Chen said honestly. The little girl's body suddenly trembled. Her face instantly turned pale, and tears unconsciously flowed out. Ning Chen's heart ached. He gently pulled little Mingyu into his arms and comforted her. It's okay. I'm just negotiating with Emperor Xia. It has nothing to do with you. Mingyu raised her tear-stained head and asked, Really? Really? Ning Chen nodded seriously. All right, since he's awake, we should be on our way, the great sage said from the side. Only then did little Mingyu notice that there was a stranger in the room. She quickly got up from Ning Chen's arms and wiped away her tears. She did not want others to see her weak side. She was the emperor of Northern Meng and represented the entire Northern Meng court. She could not show any weakness in front of the people of Great Xia. Of course, bad people were an exception. Do you want to walk on your own or piggyback? Ning Chen asked softly. I'll walk on my own, Mingyu replied. Little Mingyu reached out and grabbed his big hand. She did not even look at the great sage and walked out of the room. Ning Chen sighed. When little Mingyu was not familiar with him, she was also so proud and stubborn. Now that he thought about it, it was just a way for the little girl to protect herself. She was already an emperor before she could even remember anything. Moreover, she had to hide her identity as a girl. It was destined that little Mingyu could not show any weakness at all. In this world, the easiest thing to be an emperor was also the hardest thing to be. The academy was not far from the imperial city. If they took a carriage, they could reach it in a little more than a day. The great sage was in a hurry, but Ning Chen was not in a hurry. Because little Mingyu was still a little scared, it took them 2 days to arrive. After arriving at the imperial city, Ning Chen brought little Mingyu out of the carriage. He did not choose to enter the palace immediately. Instead, he promised the great sage that he would personally bring little Mingyu there the next morning. Seeing that the former had made up his mind, the great sage had no choice but to nod and agree. He then left in the carriage. Ning Chen randomly found an inn in the city. After paying for the room, he went upstairs directly. In the room, Ning Chen had little Mingyu sit on the bed. Then, he injected a little bit of vital energy from the life scroll into the little girl's body. There was a Khanate master in the palace. He could not be careless. The secret that little Mingyu was a girl could not be known by others. The vital energy could temporarily disturb her pulse. As long as eunuch Pei did not touch little Mingyu's body, he should not be able to tell. Mingyu, have a good rest. You may have to fight tomorrow. But I'm here. Don't be afraid, Ning Chen said softly as he rubbed the little girl's hair. Okay. Mingyu nodded and lay down obediently. Night fell. Ning Chen sat in the room and seized the time to cultivate. In his Dantian Sea of Qi, beside the 2 cyclones, a third aura gradually gathered. The blue light rolled like waves. Spiritual Qi rolled and quickly formed a very small cyclone in his Dantian Sea of Qi. In the next moment, Ning Chen forced the vital energy he had suppressed that day into the cyclone, quickly filling up the weak third cyclone. Of the 10 years of cultivation the old Marquis had given him, more than half had been consumed when he had broken through. He did not dare to continue devouring the remaining half because he was worried that his foundation would be unstable and affect his future cultivation. Now, it was the perfect time to use it to cultivate the Zhangsun branch's techniques. His talent could not be considered good. After cultivating for so many days, he could only be considered to have made some progress. In the end, the Zhangsun branch's techniques needed to be combined with the Zhangsun branch's techniques. There was no telling what would happen tomorrow. The Grand Xia's imperial palace was filled with experts, and there was not just one Khanate master. It was always good to be prepared. The spiritual qi fluctuations in the room grew stronger and stronger. The third cyclone was also constantly devouring vital energy. It was only when it was about the same size as the other 2 cyclones did it stop. However, this kind of cyclone that had not experienced any bottlenecks had an extremely unstable foundation. Once it started fighting, it would quickly consume its vital energy and its recovery speed would be much slower. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. How much effort you put in would be how much you received in return. In the end, his greatest reliance was still the life scroll. It was also the foundation of his cultivation. In the northern Meng camp, an urgent letter appeared in the commander's tent. After reading it, Fan Lingyue's eyes narrowed slightly. He had finally returned to the Grand Xia's imperial city. Men, Fan Lingyue said. Present. A heavily armored general walked in. It was the leader of the heavily armored cavalry, Qing Wuyo. Ever since Yang Hong had stayed in Heaven's Gate, the task of protecting the military advisor had fallen on him. Tell Qing Wuhan that her chance is coming soon. Remember, there is only one chance. She must not fail. Fan Lingyue said solemnly. Yes. Qing Wuyo respectfully accepted the order and immediately turned to leave. Cough cough. After Qing Wuyo left, Fan Lingyue covered his mouth and coughed violently a few times. When it landed, a bright red color appeared in his palm, so dazzling. Chapter 103. At dawn the next day, Ning Qin held Ming Yu's hand and walked towards the Xia Palace. The little girl's hat covered her long hair. From afar, she looked silly, charming, and cute. The morning sun was so bright that it shone on the ground and dyed it a faint golden color. The imperial guards of the palace lined up from the south gate to the front of the heavenly mandate hall. Their armor clanged, and every one of them exuded an intimidating aura. They were the most elite soldiers of the Xia dynasty. Ming Yu was a little nervous. Her little hand held the big hand beside her tightly, unwilling to let go for even a moment. The palace of the Xia dynasty had been invincible for thousands of years. With every step they took, they could feel the unparalleled pressure. This was something that no era or dynasty could compare to. Ning Chen and Ming Yu walked between the two rows of imperial guards. Step by step, their bodies were straight, and they never lowered their heads. One was a descendant of Huaxia, and the other was the emperor of northern Meng. Life could be lost, but dignity was priceless. In the heavenly mandate hall, Emperor Xia sat on the dragon throne. Zhang Sun sat beside him, and the three dukes stood quietly below. The 5 most powerful people of the Xia dynasty were all gathered, waiting quietly for the two who would come. Ning Qin came, holding Ming Yu's hand. He walked slowly from afar, and the moment he stepped into the hall, the atmosphere froze. Worry flashed in Zhang Suan's eyes. She should not have come today. The imperial harem should not interfere in politics. This was the rule of the ancestors. But she was really worried. Emperor Xia's attitude was the biggest variable today. No one could predict what would happen. Ning Chen looked at Zhang Sun and smiled gently. He was still a little shy as usual. Zhang Sun shook her head without leaving a trace, indicating that he should be careful and not be rash. At this moment, Emperor Xia said calmly from the dragon throne, Ning Chen, hand over the emperor of northern Meng and the secret recipe of that thing, and I will let bygones be bygones. Impossible, Ning Chen refused directly. Then there is nothing to talk about, Emperor Xia said calmly. Men, arrest this traitor. Yes. As soon as he said this, 2 captains of the Shadow Dragon Guards appeared. There was also a huge commotion outside. Imperial guards rushed in groups and blocked the way out of the heavenly mandate hall. They blocked all escape routes. Everyone's expression changed, especially Zhang Sun. She gripped her chair tightly, and there was anger in her eyes. How was this a negotiation? In the main hall, Ning Chen's eyes gradually turned cold. The real qi around his body rose, and the temperature in the main hall dropped instantly. There was no wind, and snow was falling. It was as if winter had come again. The 2 dark dragon guards also had grave expressions. They knew that the youth in front of them was not so easy to deal with. The 2 of them stood on opposite sides, secretly raising their martial arts, ready to attack. The situation was very unfavorable for Ning Chen. It was not because the two people in front of him were of the 9th rank, nor was it because there were imperial guards outside the hall. It was because he did not have a sword. Other than Prince Yan, no one else in the world could bring a sword to meet Emperor Xia. After a moment of confrontation, the two hidden dragon guards attacked at the same time. Relying on their 9th grade cultivation, their palm force pressed over. In the first palm strike, two powerful forces moved together. Their aura swallowed the mountains and rivers, and heaven and earth lost their color. Ning Chen took a step back. His spirit shivered as he circulated the life scroll to its peak. Frost surged around his body as he flipped his left and right hands. He was fighting one against two. Ta! In the raging wind, there was an almost undetectable sound of blood falling. Looking over, blood slowly flowed from the corners of the three people's mouths. After a palm strike, they were all injured. On the dragon throne, Emperor Xia narrowed his eyes slightly. Letting the tiger return to the mountain would eventually become a big problem. The little eunuch who did not know martial arts in the past was now able to fight two 9th grade hidden dragon guards. The situation was not good. Ning Chen did not want to delay any longer. He moved his palm, and the silver light faded. Blue waves rose up, and the vigorous real qi turned into huge waves. It was the secret of the Zhangsun family. The waves of the world flow to the east. The awe-inspiring might of God's descent turned the entire heavenly mandate palace blue. The huge waves pressed down like an ocean overturning. The two hidden dragon guards did not dare to be careless. They used their ultimate moves at the same time. Blue and white light shone brightly, and they met the shocking moves head-on. The ultimate moves collided. With a boom, the heavenly mandate palace was hit. Large pieces of stone flew up and hit the surrounding pillars, shattering all over the sky. The three dukes attacked together, blocking the remaining power in front of the empress. Their expressions were very serious. In the aftermath, the two hidden dragon guards took a few steps back. Then they groaned and vomited. The hidden dragon guards were actually defeated by this palm. Ning Chen took a step back. With a wave of his hand, he blocked all the broken stones in front of little Mingyu. A bloody taste rose up in his throat, but he forced it down. Not bad. Just at this moment, a hoarse voice sounded out. Then, an emaciated and thin figure walked out slowly. His face was old and haggard, but it caused everyone present to feel an irresistible pressure. Old eunuch Pei. He was the true strongest in the imperial palace. The next moment, the old figure disappeared. The withered hand reached for Ning Chen. There was no technique, but there was still no way to avoid it. At this critical moment, the Grand Advisor, who was already prepared, flashed between the two. The noble qi around him surged, and his palm met old eunuch Pei's. With a boom, the two of them took half a step back. It was a draw. Grand Advisor, what do you mean by this? Old eunuch Pei frowned and asked slowly. I promised him that if you attacked I would be responsible for stopping you, the Grand Advisor replied calmly. Eunuch Pei's frown deepened. The Grand Advisor's status was special. Ordinary officials could not compare to him. It was indeed troublesome. Teacher, is this your decision? Seated on the dragon throne, the Xia Emperor spoke calmly. The Grand Advisor looked up at the Xia Emperor, sighed softly, and said, Your Majesty, this old subject will say the same thing again. The Grand Xia needs peace, and at this time, Ning Chen is the person most likely to bring about peace. Emperor Xia did not answer. Instead, he turned his head and asked, Empress, what do you think? What Grand Advisor says is my opinion, Zhang Sun replied with a grave expression. He, very good. Emperor Xia laughed coldly. He then stood up and walked down from the high platform. He came before Mingyu, who was standing beside Ning Chen. Ning Chen has performed a meritorious service by bringing back the Northern Meng Emperor. He will be conferred the title of Jiming Marquis and be granted a residence in the imperial city. The sudden change made the three directors and Zhang Suan's expressions turn cold. For a moment, they thought they had misheard. Ning Chen's eyelids twitched violently. He felt uneasy. He felt that things were not so simple. However, the imperial edict was quickly passed down. The matter was settled, and he had to believe it even if he did not want to. Emperor Xia left after giving the imperial edict. Zhang Sun could only leave with him. Before leaving, her eyes were filled with confusion and worry. When she looked at him, she signaled for him to be careful. Ning Chen nodded. After thinking for a while, he left the palace with Mingyu. In the Grand Advisor's residence, the Grand Advisor stood in front of the desk with a grave expression. He was wondering if something had gone wrong. Emperor Xia's change was too sudden. A moment ago, he had given the order to kill, and now, he had changed his mind and made him a marquis. Xia Zi arrived with an aura of righteousness. Step by step, his steps were slow and forceful. His clothes were as white as snow, and he wore a gilded crown. His hair was as black as ink, and his face was cold and stern. His back was straight, and his figure was like a divine tree that contained an unfathomable tenacity. The person who had come was none other than the first prince, who was most likely to inherit the throne. Teacher. Chu Zi bowed respectfully. He had been taught by the Grand Advisor since he was young, and he deserved to be called teacher. The Grand Advisor nodded. He was not surprised by Xia Zi's arrival. Zi, can you tell what His Majesty is up to? Xia Zi shook his head slightly and said, I can't tell for now. Father's temperament has changed greatly, and he does things differently. Other than eunuch Pei, I'm afraid no one else in the world knows what father is up to. Doubt, 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 doubt. The Grand Advisor sighed and wrote 4 words on a piece of paper. He looked at the heavenly mandate hall in the palace with a puzzled expression. What was the Emperor of Xia thinking? In Weiyang Palace, Zhang Sun was also frowning. He had been thinking for a whole day, but he still could not figure out Emperor Xia's intentions. Qing Ning stood quietly to the side. She already knew what had happened in the heavenly mandate hall. She should have been happy that Ning Chen had been made a marquis, but all signs indicated that things were not so simple. If Emperor Xia could let go of his killing intent so easily, Xia Kingdom would not have fallen to its current state. Emperor Xia was no longer the original Emperor Xia. Ever since the war between the 2 dynasties began, Emperor Xia had changed so much that no one could recognize him. Today's situation undoubtedly showed that Emperor Xia still had a strong desire to kill Ning Chen. But why did he suddenly change in the end? She still could not figure it out. The matter of Ning Chen being made a marquis was, without a doubt, a foregone conclusion. The next day, a eunuch came to the inn and led the 2 of them to the residence that Emperor Xia had bestowed upon them. Xia Kingdom had been established for thousands of years, and there were countless nobles. The titles of marquis were also innumerable. Other than the title of marquis, ordinary marquis was nothing. The residence was not small, and there were maids and servants. After a careful inspection, they could not find anything unusual. There were at least thousands of such residences in the imperial city. It was not unusual. The uneasiness in Ning Chen's heart did not dissipate. He did not believe that Emperor Xia would let him go so easily. There must be something wrong. The eunuch returned to the palace to report the edict. The marquis residence was busy but calm. Everything was so normal that it made people uncomfortable. The uneasiness in Ning Chen's heart grew more and more serious. After that, he did not let little Mingyu leave his side for even a moment. Even if the little girl ate, slept, or went to the outhouse, he did not leave her side. Mingyu could tell that Ning Chen's mood was not right. She obediently followed beside him, moving as little as possible. Night fell, and the sky gradually darkened. Emperor Xia slowly walked to the heavenly mandate palace in the imperial city. This was the highest place in the imperial city, and one could see everything in the imperial city. Old dog Pei, do you think he will like the gift I gave him? Emperor Xia said with a cold smile. If you want him to like it, he must like it, Your Majesty. Eunuch Pei walked out and said in a hoarse voice. I am the Emperor of Xia Kingdom. Anyone who dares to go against my will must die. As he spoke, the smile on Emperor Xia's face grew colder and colder. It carried a trace of madness, and people could not help but feel cold. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.